Thanks, Bob.
Okay, good. So I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District to order, and we'll start with the roll call.
Sure. Epstein,
Present.
Schroeder, absent. Minutes-Aranda, here. Tucker, present. Norberg here.
Okay, and announcements.
Just like to welcome everyone to the regularly scheduled Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District Board meeting. If you're on Zoom, please use the raise your hand function if you'd like to speak.
Okay, good. Are there any corrections to the agenda or the consent calendar the board wants to bring up? Okay. I mean, everyone avoid eye contact. I'll take that as a no. All right, next, comments from the audience and opportunity to address the board on non-agenda items. Is there any online that I don't say anything? No one present? Okay, more eye contact avoidance. I'm not sensitive though. I didn't see any written comments from the public
That is
in
correct.
the board package. So we're ready for the adoption of the consent calendar. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved. I'll
Okay.
second that.
Moved in second. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes. So we're ready for item 9A, finances.
Yes, Tommy is on leave, so I will be going over that. So just in terms of the overview and budget variances, he's again broken out the other income, which is a common question. They're all out there. Are there any questions on the operating income or the non-operating other income? Hearing none.
Danny?
Then on the combined income statement, across all funds, we're better than budget by over $100,000. This includes an other income, which would be the donation of the fire truck from the 501c3 to the district, which was valued at or cost the 501c3 $395,000. So you'll see that moving through a few of the items. So any questions on the combined income? Okay. And then for the fire department, again, we're worse than planned by $18,000. And this also includes the other income, which is the fire truck, the new fire truck, well, the new used fire truck. And for water, we're better than budget. Contract services are worse than budget due to a state unfunded state mandate of a cross-connection control plan, which we are in the throes of doing. It's probably going to be complete in the next month. But that was an unexpected expense, and we had to hire a consultant to perform that. Salaries and wages, to your question from a bit ago, Bob, still remains true due to more time spent in solid waste than unpaid leaves. And then wastewater, we are also better than budget, and salary and wages are lower due to a vacant position. For employee housing, we're worse than budget by about $20,000 due to the increase in the allocation to Lava Rock from the actual number of 1.8% to 6%. And then we also, our income is less because we set aside a dedicated snow removal housing unit, a 2-bedroom unit for snow removal staff, for which we don't charge them. And then we set aside a 2-bedroom unit for on-call operators and admin staff should they be stuck on mountain. So the income is down if you look at that versus prior years. For the electric, we're worse than budget by $116,000. This was transformer testing. And then, as we always talk about, Shell likes to go back in time, and we have a February 22 invoice that they hadn't billed us properly for that increased our cost of goods sold.
Can I ask about that? And I know we've talked about how this is it's very hard to determine this, and it happens over time. Is there any like statute of limitations about as to how far back in our contract with them, how far they can go back or when they can go back?
No, I mean, we received the goods. So, I mean,
yeah, but
I would argue that's unjust
like,
enrichment.
Is that?
I would argue that that's unjust enrichment. Should we not have to pay that? But that is, we do have to go back and we'd have to pay those.
But I guess my question is more like, it's like a time and duration of, like, I guess my concern at the end of the day is how do we know we're being charged correctly in some ways? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've not looked at these invoices in any level of detail, but it worries me when we get invoices from 2 years ago and they're saying that this is now the truth. And like, how can we verify that?
I mean, we were able to verify they didn't bill us for all the
Okay,
the kilowatt hours we used. That. we were
that part of
able-
it.
That we could verify.
That I feel comfortable with, but yeah, if there are other parts of it, like, oh, no, it was this many cents versus this many cents or something like that. Is there,
I think, Howard, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, we don't have the capability to do that. We don't have 100 guys in a room being acting as actuarials. We are not PG&E.
Go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, I've asked in the past for paperwork to show how we're being charged. And you sent me lots of data, and I've never seen anything that was as straightforward as what I get from the district, which says I use this many kilowatt hours and the rate per kilowatt hour is this. I am going to bring it to the finance committee to ask that we have a presentation so that at least the finance committee, understand what's going on. Because I've been on the finance committee, and I've tried to get the information, and I have no clue how we're being charged. And I think it's time for at least the finance committee to understand. And I think this whole situation where they can come and charge us 2 years later is just one more indication that things are not right. Thank you.
Could you elaborate when you say how we are being charged?
Just ask for copies of the invoices.
Or how we as a PUD, not
Yes,
as individual players?
I'm not talking about me as ratepayer.
I'm sorry.
I'm saying the public utility district being charged by Shell.
Mm,
I haven't got a clue. I mean, I have a meter in my house.
mhm,
I can look at the meter and I can compare that to the results.
mhm.
And the district gives me daily data on my electric use. And I know how much per kilowatt hour, but I haven't seen anything resembling that comes from Shell.
Okay, I've noted your question. We'll address it, but let's go back to this agenda. The agenda item that we're on.
Sure. Let's see. Snow removal is worse than budget right now at 43,000. This is almost exclusively in operations and maintenance. As you'll recall, the board opted to defer some refurbishment on tracklesses to try and save costs after KMA decided not to renew their contract with the district. So that led to additional maintenance ultimately being necessary. So ostensibly nothing was saved by trying to cut that corner. We ended up having to pay it anyway. Propane, we're better than budget by quite a bit. Cost of goods is down. We're getting better pricing between the two suppliers we now have, but we still have invoices that haven't arrived for February, and they're usually about a month behind. So that'll go down a little bit, but we are doing better with our cost of goods sold. And there's no rail strikes, which always helps.
Yeah.
And then solid waste, we're better than budget by $34,000. So any questions on any of that?
Any questions? No? Okay,
And I'll just skip to the
March preliminaries.
exactly. You read my mind. So March preliminaries were basically tracking year to date a little bit better than budget overall. So obviously expenses come in March, and this is subject to change, but as we can see, we're doing better than budget for the month of March and the year to date. Any questions on preliminaries? And then cash flow. We did make the Russ payment as we talked about previously, so you'll see that in there. And then basically we're tracking where we ought to be. The $1 million variance is basically because we've put stuff in savings accounts to earn interest, so it catches up on the bottom line there. We've moved it out of operating and moved it down to our reserve funds, which we now have multiple of, and I'll talk about that in the general manager report. But we have many more reserve funds now with 5-star that are generating interest than we ever did with Bank of the West or BMO. So district's earning quite a bit more money. So you'll see that on next month's statement. You're going to see other income, and it's going to be interest. We've already made 20,000 just in 2 months, and whereas didn't make that in an entire year with BMO. So
When we look at next year's budget, are you thinking of changing the cash flow so it sums earlier than the very bottom line? Or you want to leave it this way?
mean, it's been like this long before my time.
Yes,
Happy to change it if that's the board's desire.
well, it's just the variance to budget wouldn't make sense if we're not including the budget.
If you're not including the bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've just never had that LAIF thing before. That's a new thing that started, but we started LAIF
Yeah.
3 years ago, 4 years. Doug, were you on when we did that switch? I think that's about the
It's
time.
around the time.
So yeah, so for 3 years, it's been odd.
Yeah,
So
so we
we
might,
can make them
we might want to
above
think
the
about
line if
that.
that makes sense. We can,
Okay.
and then put the variance at the very last. That would. So, well, I'll mention it to finance and if.
Yeah.
We'll go from there.
Okay. Good. Any questions on cash flow?
No.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to item 9B, performance reporting. On page 44.
So for electric, we had 14% unidentified system losses, bringing the average to date to 10%, which is in line with our historic system losses in electric. And propane went back positive again this month for a positive overall, which means we aren't creating propane out of thin air. So any questions on electric
That's
or
too bad.
propane? Okay. And then water, we saw a spike in unidentified system losses, but we're still for the year to date under overall. And we did have a few customers with significant leaks over the last month that we were able to identify and alert them to, and generally they got to them in a timely fashion. But that wouldn't affect this number, but you'll see that in the variance when we get the wastewater, just for the credits there. So
Was that using our automated system that you used?
Mhm.
Notifies?
Not only is the automated system, but staff gets a report daily. I think Chris gets 3 reports, Bob, so to that effect, and we call them immediately if it looks like anything of substance.
Right.
Yeah, we had someone using 138 cubic feet an hour, which we alerted them.
You have any blood damage?
I don't know.
It was, I think it was a running toilet. So
Not at 130. It wasn't.
it was something else.
It was this.
Oh, it's a different one.
It was a different. Yeah,
Oh,
that was
okay.
the three
Yeah.
3 cubic feet an hour.
Oh, okay.
So wastewater.
I'm sorry to ask on the spike at 360 stands out, and I realize that year to date, we're within the plan, but what do we know what caused? Is it because of
Yeah,
those?
so as Brandy has explained it quite a few of the last meetings, I'll try and regurgitate what she says. If we start with water in the tank, if the tank's topped off and we draw water from the tank and don't produce it, or flip that, we're down. It's going to vary from month to month. So the tank levels have an effect on this, which is why it usually bounces high, low, high, low, high, low on the losses. You're going to see this in perpetuity. We don't have meters on the tanks that we could use to calculate that. So it's just a
Yeah.
function of how the system is.
Our tanks are just short of about 1 million in capacity, right?
I think they're 900,000.
Yeah. And between the two of them. And so this would be a third of that number. I don't know at what rate we use the capacity of the tank. I don't know if we typically keep them half full or 3/4 full or what, but 360 is just I mean, I realize we've had 380 in August. I see the spikes, the ups and downs. It's just such a big number. It's hard to wrap one's head around how we lose 1/3 of our capacity.
Not losing 1/3 of our capacity.
How should I understand it?
It depends, again, if the tank starts full, right? Or the tank starts empty, and we're running wells, you have a reserve capacity you're using in the system that's not necessarily being generated.
I see. So you might start the month at a low level, be at a higher level right now, and that's going to reflect it in a.
Yeah, so if you pump the
Okay.
tank up, then fill the tank up, but no one used it, and then the tank's full at the end of the month,
I see.
and we don't have meters on the tanks.
I see.
Which would be
You have a question?
We don't have meters on the tank.
No.
How does the well know? when the tank-
transducers. They're all hand operated. The operators decide when they fill the tanks. There's no telemetry between the tanks. There's no telemetry between the tanks and the wells. None.
Well, it would be relatively easy to put in a monitor that would tell you exactly the number of gallons in storage just based on the pressure on a transducer. So that would eliminate all the uncertainty that's going on there.
It would.
Okay.
Is this a topic that has been discussed a lot in the last 2 years? Is this old
This
news?
just this issue is old news. Yeah, it's
Oh.
been discussed for decades.
And the merits of telemetry or some monitoring system have been evaluated, assessed, and decided against in the past?
I wouldn't say
We're so
that.
small. I mean, we haven't decided against it, but we're so small. We do have telemetry in the capital budget coming up,
I
proposing
see.
that.
I see.
So we are
Okay.
proposing telemetry in the capital budget finally for the wells. But right now, we're so small, the operators they can go to the tank. We have 1.875 square miles of service area. They can drive to the tank and go to the well and turn it on in a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
So do we want to spend $20,000 to $30,000? That's a question for the board on the capital budget for sure.
Okay, thanks for explaining.
Obviously
Okay.
snow melt, it's that time of year, a little bit earlier than usual, but you can see the wastewater I starting to peak up, and it's probably
Mhm.
going to continue through the rest of at least through May, because I'm assuming we'll not have any snow on the ground after May. So that's normal. Early, but normal.
That's optimistic.
INI is the acronym for
There
water.
might be some at the top at May, Peter.
It's fairly deep in spots. I mean, it's gonna be hit and miss.
You guys can take bets. Chris wanted to know about what
I-
INI stands for.
I think I know what it is. I forget what it stands for. It's the water that seeps into our wastewater treatment. What does it
It
stand for?
seeps into our inflow and infiltration. It seeps into our collection system.
And it stands for,
Inflow and infiltration.
oh, okay.
The N
Thank
is
you,
for
yes.
and.
Yeah, okay, I, sorry.
Yes, sir.
So is there gonna be a program to try to reduce the infiltration and inflow this summer?
Yes,
More manhole lids.
and grouting
Yeah.
and
Yes.
injection grouting. Then yeah,
And that's-
there will be more I repairs this summer. Yes,
There's
that's
a list of all the projects later on in the agenda. Well, I'm sure that Eric will go through.
but yes, there is definitely a project to do that, and it's ongoing. It's multi-year project.
You know, this might be a good time to consider the telemetry if we're gonna be performing work on the tanks this summer, you know, they're gonna dive it and photograph it, aren't they? Isn't that
They are
still in the
going
plan?
to dive it, yes, and video and photograph it, yes.
Maybe that would be an appropriate time to consider doing that. I don't know.
I think the appropriate time is after we recoat. Which is,
After you recode.
so we're gonna, that's also in the capital budget, so your tanks are gonna be drawn down to nothing. That's a very easy time to do an installation without having to use divers that can only be down 15 minutes at a time
Right.
and get a half-hour break. And you're paying $500 an hour last time I hired divers, so that would be my recommendation, and that we coincide those together.
Did they start charging us when they get to the tank or from the end
Yes,
of the road?
but we don't pay the dive rates until they start putting on their gear. Once they
Okay.
start putting on the first piece of gear, you get dive rates.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're fine, it wouldn't be a problem, but the Dangberg tank, I don't know.
What does RECO
Okay.
stand for? Is that reconnaissance? What's RECO?
Rico?
I thought it said
Recoding.
after, recode. Coat, sorry.
The tanks have
Thank
to be
you.
coated on the inside.
I didn't
And
catch
the
it.
outside.
And the outside too, I guess, yeah. But it's mainly the inside that we're worried about because you don't want the steel to
Right,
decompose,
you
to
know,
rust.
pinholes,
Yeah.
pinholes turn into rust, turn into holes, turn into tank failures.
Right.
Okay,
Catastrophic.
getting back to performance reporting.
Sorry, that was it.
Okay, are there any questions on the charts or anything else? Okay, not hearing any. We're ready for item 9C, policy 630.
So district council, let us know that we needed to make some changes to this policy. And so while we were in there looking at it, we found a lot of other issues that needed to be cleaned up since we were doing it. So in general, capital connection fees nomenclature was just changed to connection fees. We haven't called them capital connection fees for over a decade. So that was just a change. Some of the fees referenced are actually adopted annually by the board as part of the miscellaneous fee schedule. So the reference to that was added. And then sections B3 and B4, we'll go over that. Just they were too narrow and didn't fully encompass all of our air service or all of what we do in terms of water, wastewater. B5 is the new section district council advised us of. And D2 was eliminating something in this policy that we had eliminated in the standards about 7 years ago. So with that said, the B3 and B4, this just more broadly describes the district service and tries to capture everything in terms of under what conditions we provide service, which would be adequate treatment, storage, transmission, and distribution capacity. So those were not fully captured before. And then for wastewater, adequate treatment, collection, lift station, and disposal capacity, which was definitely not fully captured before as well. And so and then I guess that's B5 is we don't really have a choice. That's the attorney telling us we have to do it. And removing, talking about the fees as we talked about, and then simply adding the other discussion. So any questions on this policy or?
Doesn't look like it.
Pretty
The
straightforward.
avoidance of eye contact, I'm guessing it.
Yes. Not the eye.
Everybody's reading. Everybody's busy reading on their computer, as am I.
I guess.
Well, didn't the operations committee approve this several months ago?
Yes. Several months, but we had a busy agenda last month, so I just pushed it to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was reviewed and recommended adoption by operations. Correct.
Okay, are there any further discussion or a motion to adopt?
I'd make a motion to adopt policy statement number 630.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hey, Doug, did you
I said aye.
see your lips move?
Sorry.
Okay, good. Then we'll move on to 9D, the draft capital budget.
Well, this operations reviewed this. We've made some changes already in this. So know that this is just the first iteration, but I had to get into the packet before ops looked at it just based on the timing of the committee meeting versus the board meeting. So this will come back again to the board overall, but this is the first look at it. Starting with water, and I'm just going to identify anything that's new from last year. Otherwise, everything just rolled forward from last year, but I'm going to identify anything new.
Okay,
So in water, again, another lovely unfunded state mandate. As a result of doing the cross connection control program, we have to do a hazard assessment as well, which involves some differential pressure testing, visiting a significant portion of districts' actual water customer sites, reviewing all backflow prevention, backward reading meters, anything that basically could contaminate the district's water distribution system from a customer's residence or business. And so it's gonna be spread over 2 years just based on the timing in the winters.
is this under capacity? This is under
This is
replacement
under
then?
Distribution capacity component.
It's under capacity, not
Yes.
replacement. Okay,
Yeah, it's not replacement because it's brand new.
all right, and we expect to have to add backflow valves?
We expect, in short, yes.
Yeah,
Someone's going to have to add backflow valves. Some will be on the burden of the district. Some will be the burden of the customer
okay,
as a result of these new state mandates.
okay, but
How will that, how will that be determined? Is that by?
That's part of the cross connection control plan report.
Okay.
So basically, if we have ownership of it and it's our responsibility, then we'll be adding them. If it's the customers, they will have to add them in order to be compliant. Okay, so yet another unfunded mandate, the lead service line inventory, LSLI, you'll hear us start calling it that. This basically the state started this out very slowly after the whole Flint, Michigan issue. And it's finally trickled down to a district of our size in California. And so basically we have to inventory every water service connection and the potential for lead. Now, normally this would be quite easy because we could say, well, there's no lead in our system, which is true. But we can't say there's no lead in the customer system. And the state in its infinite wisdom has placed the burden on water districts to determine what's in a customer's home. So currently there are quite large water providers suing the state over this because it's one, water districts have no legal authority to come into someone's home. And two, again, it's an unfunded mandate. Just to give you an idea, Amador Water Agency solicited a bid to do the LSLI in just Sutter Creek, which is one of their service territories. It was going to cost them $280,000 just for theirs. So we're obviously much smaller, but much more rural, much harder to get to some of our meters than theirs. So this is what I'm budgeting for. I'm also watching the litigation to see, but I want it in the budget just in case, but I'm watching litigation to see when or if this is going to go through.
When would be the requirement?
If we had to do this, would we just verify the construction materials, or do we have to go in and see whether as-built matches the construction materials?
It's unknown. The state has yet to issue that, but they're saying we're responsible to make that determination.
Uh-huh.
So from our perspective, we would simply look in the meter vault and say, what's the piping coming out downstream of our meter? If it's not galvanized or lead, and you can't connect lead to our meters. So if we have new meters, obviously there's no lead going downstream. We can also go by, they are allowing us to go by updates to the building code and the plumbing code when they eliminated lead and when they reduced the lead allowed in solder for copper.
Mm-hmm.
So we can rely on that a bit too. This is some of the reasons I've been asking for report server things. Bob's like,
Oh, I see.
this is all coming from this lead service line inventory.
Sure.
Yeah. But I did want to capture it just because it is a cost, whether it's this year or next year, but it could, right now the state is saying now, but the litigation has now made that change.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, and I'm sure, I mean, I'm sure it's Supervisor Brown knows this is a huge issue for rural counties, particularly Amador County, to deal with, especially older gold rush communities. It's going to be a nightmare.
It's so stupid.
Yes. It would be a different thing if systems were getting lead hits in their systems, but we already test for lead. We don't get lead hits. Look at our consumer confidence reports, look at Amador Waters or City of Jackson's. No one's getting lead hits. This should be limited, and at least this is how the litigation goes, should be limited to people that are having problems.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a
Okay.
new one. Moving on.
Before you move on, sorry to digress for just the structure of this spreadsheet. I need an explanation, please, capacity versus replacement. And I also struggled to understand why how the 5-year totals work. For example, and I think the next item will be wastewater. They don't add up over 5 years, so there's probably some methodology I just don't follow. First question is, what's capacity versus replacement?
Capacity is new.
Okay,
So replacement is something that exists that we're replacing.
okay, that's pretty straightforward. And then I guess as you get into wastewater, the 776 is not a sum
Maybe
of.
let's finish water, if that's
Thought we
okay.
were, yeah, sure.
But yeah, there could be an error in the formula. It's possible. I mean, we're dealing with multiple sheets, so it's very possible there's an error in the formula. So I appreciate you pointing that out when we get there. Let me know which one it is. So one of the things we talked about at ops is right now our wells are producing quite fine, and we're not having the lead and manganese hits we were having before that were reducing our production in our primary wells. So we're recommending to basically defer this off to a 5 and be an as needed. If we start seeing issues, we can bring it back, but there's no reason to track it as a 1. It's just where it fell from the prior year. So that was one of the things we talked about in ops. See, we have the rate study coming up. I reached out to Mark Hildebrand, who did our last wastewater rate study. This was, I was shocked that it was basically this. He said, are there any major changes? And I said, not that I'm aware of. The board could always change their mind, but not that I'm aware of. He said, so his scope and fee 5 years later is basically identical to his scope and fee. So we didn't see a huge increase. So it was 60,000, which was nice.
This study here.
And then he also is able to do a connection fee study at the time. So originally we had kind of scoped out doing connection fee studies as all as one. Once we had all the master plans done, he said he can do it as part of the rate study and incorporate it then as long as the master plans are done and our capital is done. Well, right now we're tracking for both of those to be done before he starts his rate study. So there's basically economy of scale to slip this in and just do the connection fee study for water and wastewater next year. Because we'll have that, and we'll actually do electric next year as well, because
Mhm.
the master plan is coming someday, Brandy? Yes. Let's see, fire hydrant replacements, we talked about synopsis as well. We have identified 4 critical ones that we want to replace. We're going to send it out as part of a bid package. So that is going to be increased from the 8,000, since we're going to try and do 4. So that's going to jump up from what we have in here. And you can see the well telemetry we have budgeted for both well 2 and well 3. So going back to the telemetry discussion. And then the tank coatings next year, well, 2 fiscal years from now, and then the lodge tank 3 fiscal years from now. That would be the time we can install those. And then the building hardening we talked about as well. So those are all just pull forwards. Any questions on water, the rest of water?
Just that the distribution system valve replacement does not add up over the course of that row for 50,000.
Thank you.
Thousands.
I will fix that.
So the telemetry that you're talking about here on the wells, but not the tanks.
Correct. We'll do the tanks when we coat them.
And so that's going to be
We want to budget that, yeah.
right. So that will be in
Okay.
3 years from now. 26,
Well,
27.
since we're done with water, I do want to take a step back and simply ask, we're talking about our capital expenditure budget and plan. I've been aware of this, of course, for many months, but is it true that this is a detailed discussion that we don't have every month, do we? How often do we talk about this spreadsheet and our CapEx? Is this a monthly agenda item?
No, the goal of this is to have an overall allocation by priority over 5 years, but then each individual item has to be approved when we're ready to spend the money. So individual items are discussed.
Will
when the
we be
expenditure-
voting on or reluctant to even ask this, are we voting on a 5-year CapEx program today?
No. It's
This
just
is a
getting-
first draft or a first
it's a
discussion?
draft. You might argue it's a second draft, but
Yeah.
it's early.
It hasn't been reviewed in finance committee or ops.
Ops is going to review it
We
next week.
reviewed it 2
Wednesday.
days ago.
Okay, so this is not
For
new
the
to
first
ops.
time, yeah.
Got it.
And a lot of
Um,
the stuff has been
There you
repeated
go.
over the
Yeah.
years because it's a 5-year overall plan.
By my way of thinking, it would help to take a top-down view of this as opposed to speaking about such specific line items, many of which are very small. By that, I mean, for example, we're talking about a $14 million 5-year plan. We've got, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 million this coming year or this year alone. The big items are propane, that sort of thing. I'm having trouble seeing the forest for the trees in this discussion. So would you mind just first zooming out and talking a little bit about this overall process and what the big items are?
I would have to go through sheet by sheet. I mean, the biggest item is obviously the wastewater treatment
Well, we
plant.
skipped right over the first page, which is the I guess the summary or the total that totals up to 14 million. We went right into water and lead service line inventory.
Uh-huh.
So give me some context, please, for
Each of these sheets adds up into that summary sheet. And so we go through each utility and deal with the
Okay.
projects there, which ultimately feed into the summary sheet. So you can't go up to the summary sheet and make changes there.
Okay, then as we walk into this big discussion of a 5-year CapEx plan, what are the most important items that we should be looking out for as we get into this whole discussion?
Priority number.
Okay, they're prioritized.
See that column where it says priority number?
Yes, I do under each one, right?
A 1 is the
Okay.
highest priority. It's
Mhm.
like 1 through 5.
Mhm.
And so you kind of, I'm just talking about how I understand it.
Thank
is
you, it makes sense.
You match it through one time as needed. And what you do what you can, because basically we're looking at a summertime building season, which is very limited.
Mhm.
Chris, what
So I don't know if
that
that
does
answers
for
your
each
question.
individual department is say, what's the thing that's most likely to break or
Mhm.
more likely to improve productivity, whatever, in their opinion, it's a ranking. And then depending on how much money we have available, we start with the priority ones
I see.
and get as far as we can. So the sum of this exceeds what we're going to do. Right, because you don't want to say a priority 5 is 1/5 of the total, right?
Okay.
So the main thing that counts here is understanding what's changed and what are the critical items that need to be done, and can the budget accommodate the critical ones? If there's additional budget, can we go into the second and third? So
Okay.
that's the process. And then every year the columns shift one to the left.
These also feed into the operating budget at the bottom line, which shows can the individual funds afford the capital budget.
Okay, well, then I'll approach, I'll go through this bottoms up, then that's how we're gonna do it. That's fine. I can do that also. If,
Sorry,
if
can I
we're getting
finish my
it-
question
go
on
ahead.
water? I was trying to finish. I just want to make sure before we move on. So the telemetry that we were talking about for the meters exists. We're going to propose to the telemetry for when the recoding happens. Am I not seeing? I don't think I see the telemetry line.
I
I
don't see it in here because it just came up today.
Okay.
So it was just a suggestion and
So we can.
I see.
we might coordinate it if it's practical.
I will add it to the
Thank you.
budget, and then ultimately, I mean, even if it's 3 years down the road or
Yeah.
2 years down
Yeah.
the road in one case, 3 in the other.
Right.
And the board will make the decision next year.
Great.
Does that stay in?
I just want to make sure I wasn't missing it in this document. Thank you.
No, you're not.
This thing is kind of a moving
Yeah, of course. No, we
moving
talked
goal.
about it earlier, and I wanted to make sure. I thought you said it was planned for, and I wanted to make sure I had it all aligned in my head. Thank you.
Yeah, I should have said will be.
Thank you.
planned for.
Thank you.
Okay, with that tense correction, are we ready to move to wastewater?
I'm not a word mind.
As we move to wastewater, that is the, under capacity, that's the, line that I could not make the math work. It seems to be off by 2x.
It's a mistake. There's an error there.
I'll check the formula. So obviously there's something wrong. And when we move a column every year, that seems to, 1 or 2 sheets gets
Yeah,
it
it's the sum of the first 2 columns instead of all 5.
instead of all.
Yeah.
With regards to wastewater, there's nothing, let's see if there's anything new. Nothing new in wastewater that didn't just move forward from last year or as part of the wastewater treatment plant project that, I think, see a typo. Is there anything in, I don't think there's anything substantively new in wastewater. We're doing enough with the big project that I think that's where it all sits.
I'm looking through the 3 pages of wastewater, and the big item is that 6.2 at the very bottom of page 3, I think. Is that right? So, no, I guess that's a total. I'm just generally aware that wastewater treatment plant is the biggest CapEx project that we have going on, and
Correct.
you see it, of course, in the top line, and I guess it comes together through the addition of all those replacement components. Not capacity, but
There are some
replacement.
capacity components.
Oh,
to
are
the
there
treatment
both?
plant.
Okay. And I think the bottom line seems to be the project is what we've expected. It's on plan, it's on budget, it's just big. So
Yeah.
there it is. Okay. And in terms of timing, it looks, the brunt of it is this fiscal year, next fiscal year, and then tapers down over
Correct.
roughly the next 2.5 years.
Yeah, they'll finish 2 summers from now.
Okay, so no surprises, even though it's big. Got it.
Any questions on wastewater? Employee housing, one of the things we caught in that is the water heaters we have in there, due to them being ventless, last time cost us about $12,000. So that number has been updated on the water heaters. That was the only change, I believe, that came out of ops, right, Peter? I think that was the only change.
Yeah, it was just brought up the question of, is it cheaper to drill holes in the building?
Yes.
And so we don't have this problem continuously. It was a selection that we made to save money, and it proved not to be a money saver in the building's design.
Yes, yes. And fire, we just put a placeholder in if the board decides to do the 218 or not, just put a placeholder in for that. We looked at a few RFPs that had gone out recently, and that seems to be about the price that people have been paying, so. Structure gear got very expensive. I think we used to budget 6,000 a year for that, and it's just gone through the roof, and that's the actual cost of doing business. So that's another increase. With regards to electric, and we have we will have the master plan soon, and therefore we will be able to do the connection fee study. Unfortunately, Mark Hildebrand does not touch electric in terms of rate studies or connection fee studies, nor did he have a suggestion for me. So we'll have to find someone who's capable of doing that, and hopefully someone else that can do the rate study as well at the same time, or at least just to have that consultant in our files. The one thing we talked about as well at ops is the second line under the replacement, the meadow direct burial line replacement. There may be an option. We would lose redundancy we currently have, feeding from the wastewater treatment plant to the east lift in terms of power. We have that now. It's possible we could feed it from the east side. At the time that was installed, the east side, I guess, didn't really exist. And if MU was still here, and this was the district's way of hedging our bets in case MU went down, and we could use our generators to run the east lift. It's possible we could connect everything over there from the east side and eliminate this line. We need to still have that internal discussion. We talked about it ops. Do we want to lose that redundancy, or do we want to maintain it? If we want to maintain it, this is roughly the cost of doing business. Fortunately, electric has the most money in its reserves. So
Could you point to that line item? Oh, this is under electric.
second
Replacement?
item under replacement.
Oh, meadow direct bear, thank you. $500,000.
And that's I think the only thing we talked about that was new or changing out of electric. So
And yet it is a priority one. Do I see that right?
it's a priority one. Yeah, because we do the design this year and the construction next year.
Because priority one means that it's staff recommendation that this is a top priority, right? That we do this?
It is,
Yeah.
but now we're thinking we can feed it a different way and save $500,000 potentially. We still need to noodle through it, but I want to as a placeholder.
I'll just state the obvious, which is, I guess, what I'm good at. Electricity is our biggest revenue. It's our biggest business. It also has a mere, 8 or 9% of our CapEx plan for 5 years. I guess we invested a lot in electricity through the whole line, the PG&E Connect in the past, but just there is that mismatch. If it means anything, I don't know, but biggest revenue source and a relatively small investment into it.
Newest infrastructure versus oldest infrastructure. That's really the bottom line on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And most of this is catching up with the distribution system, not the generation.
Right. So
Or
distribution
the transmission.
distribution system is the biggest concern.
It's
Relative.
It's the
Yeah.
old part.
It's
Yeah.
the oldest. It's the oldest part, so it is the biggest concern for electric.
So it was mainly direct burial.
Yeah.
Although I think we've gone a long way towards eliminating a lot of it, Peter.
Yeah.
We know where they are, and a lot of it's not ours, which is good.
A lot of it's
It's
not
bad
ours.
for whose it is, but
It's the chair 4 and
it's the backside line that's been,
Okay.
that was identified in 2001, 2002 as a
right.
critical thing that needed to be replaced. And I know Brandy reached out and shared that report with the new general manager, Newberry. So he has that just as a reminder. But yeah, the district's very concerned about that. But again, we don't own that, but someone needs to be concerned about that. And then there's some other ones.
and the meters at the wrong end.
Correct. Yeah. Mhm. The meters are at the wrong ends. Yes.
Just to restate this, our electrical distribution is by and large, or almost completely in conduit now, as opposed to direct burial. Tell me if I'm wrong here. And the big exception is not district wire, it's Vale out to the Chair 4 area.
There's a
That
couple,
which we own and operate is almost entirely in conduit.
most of what we own and operate is in conduit and is up to current standards. Yes. Most, I would say 80-ish%, 75.
I think 80 Seems fair.
80. So there's 20%
still
hanging out there.
A portion on Loop Road, if that.
Mhm.
were to be-
Well, there's children wearing their shoes.
Caples Lake Pump,
Yeah,
another one.
right.
Caples Lake Pump is for snowmaking,
Mhm.
Yes.
and is that our owned and operated?
Possibly.
Oh. Okay.
That one might have snuck in.
It depends on how the MU, how one
Yeah.
reads the MU contract.
What's that mean again?
Mountain Utilities.
And Peter, this was in here and I missed it when we talked about it before. The phase 3 loop road project is listed as under replacement.
Okay,
It's a category 5 right now, but if you-
95,000.
it's about, yeah, you found it. Never mind.
Yeah.
You're quick on that.
That's
yeah.
the direct burial replacement.
No, this is this is the final phase of the loop road project. Yeah.
So the original powerhouse used to be down at where they had their vehicle shop. So some of those lines they're experienced. That's the second oldest building in Kirkwood is the vehicle shop. The Kirkwood Inn. Because that used to be the original Caltrans station.
Gotcha.
And moving on to propane, there's quite a bit of changes here and two for the quite positive, actually. The propane master plan, we finally got the contract signed with Stantec. And that's only going to be 55,000. So we've updated that. So that's the savings. And as we talked about at operations, since the district will no longer be offering propane connections after January 8th of next year, there's no reason to do a connection fee study. So
That's a good point.
I think Peter made that obvious point to me. So
Would you say that again?
A wise
The
man.
district will no longer be,
yes, the district will no longer offer propane connections to existing lots within existing subdivisions after January 8th, 25. And we will know,
existing lots, existing subdivisions.
and we no longer offer propane to new subdivisions.
We curtail
After-
that first, and then our policy was to allow people that we'd already agreed to their development, but they haven't taken use of it yet. So now we're gonna curtail all that.
Are there significant developments, new developments that have been told this and cut off that, I mean,
No one's come in. No one's come in with a new subdivision since the board ceased offering propane for new subdivisions.
is
No
the
one's-
last new subdivision Sentinel West? Anyone know?
So it's
Yeah, well-
Timber Creek townhomes.
Timber Creek Townhomes was a pre-existing, they already had a final map, so they were pre-existing. And they have their meters set, so. In Timber Creek Townhomes case, they would have to set their meters by January 8th, 25, because that subdivision existed.
I see.
In Sentinels West, to your question. If they don't, so the subdivision, we offer propane to them, but the individual connections, if they don't happen by January 8th, they will not be served
Oh,
propane.
interesting. Likewise, if someone were to buy a vacant lot in East Meadows and build it, they have that same deadline.
Correct.
Are there scenarios where an existing homeowner would have reason to need a new connect on Dangberg or East Meadows Road, or would an existing house ever need a new connect?
They wanted to switch propane.
Yeah, I mean, if someone wanted to switch an electric only home to propane.
But not if something breaks or their
Well,
meter
this is-
breaks. This
New
is a
connection is not, a break is a repair.
Thank
New
you,
connection
okay.
is new.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah,
The only project I have in question is the sprung structure replacement.
yeah, but it's an existing propane connection. It's not a new connection.
Right. But if they had talked about doing it by 2025.
I don't think that's true, but their propane
Anymore.
connection exists and they will continue to have that if they want it.
That they don't use anymore.
Yeah, but if someone's connected now and
And
if
rebuild.
Noia happens, if a house explodes
Right,
and they're no longer using propane
right.
and they rebuild, as long as they continue paying their base rate
Okay.
throughout, they're still an
Okay.
existing customer. Noia is the perfect example of that. They've never not been a propane customer because they've been paying base rates since.
Right,
If they opted out, which the board has offered, people can opt out of propane. That was part of the same resolution the board adopted.
public benefits.
If someone wanted to opt out of propane and put their own tank in, they would no longer be a customer and then they would be subject to the January
Right.
8th.
Sprung structure. What's that?
The tense.
Oh.
Timber Creek.
All right,
That's their official.
anything else on propane?
Anything else on propane? We need to replace the vaporizers. So that is, and that one kind of, that is new. We were due for that, but just it's a big hit. Propane has some reserves, which is good. And then the propane tank and vaporizer roof enclosures, we are proposing design this year, followed by construction of subsequent year. We believe that's a one season construction, thankfully.
That's the thing we talked about 6-8 months ago, maybe about
Exactly
when,
right,
when we were considering the second tank versus not. This is that discussion. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Could I ask for the Reader's Digest, the short summary of that, because this is a 2 point something million CapEx?
Yeah, basically, it will allow our operators to safely service the propane tanks in winter in heavy snow conditions.
Oh, I saw that, yeah.
And then the propane service line replacement, this is finally moved up to the top here, but it's
But
that,
you did call, I'm sorry, you did call these a heavy hit or a big item, the vaporizers, but that's the 125K.
for a
Or is-
new item, it's a big item, yes.
And the 2.1K is,
It's an old item.
oh, because it's old, all right. And it's also.
Everybody knew it was coming and we talked about it, as Doug said, 4 months ago, 6 months ago, and 8 months ago.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
And then the propane service line replacement, the first year would be design, followed by 2 seasons of construction, because that will be a pretty substantive, labor intensive endeavor.
What are the endpoints of that?
It's basically the old service lines. So basically, we're talking west side. This all rises out of Noya. Many things came out of Noya, as we all know. But we have many service laterals over there without curb stops.
Okay.
We have curb stops aren't in pavement. We have propane service laterals that are on rock under 2 inches of dirt.
Okay.
And because of Noya and because of the attorney's advice, we have ownership from the line all the way to the meter, and we need to bring it up to our standards. And
Yeah.
that's where it's deficient. Everywhere else is built to a better standard.
Mhm.
Those are substandard if they're older, for sure, which most of them are older.
And most of those laterals were steel, weren't they?
I think Brandy said they replaced all those. About
All of them? Or most of them?
All of them,
Those are the really faulty ones.
yeah,
Um,
it's a plastic
Right.
system now.
I'm just gonna throw out an off the wall idea that we can totally reject quickly.
we're almost done.
Yeah, well, if it's gonna cost us a certain amount of money to upgrade a house and they just as soon move to a heat pump.
Hmm.
Is there some savings that we would incur that we might incentivize the house to switch?
Well, public
Could that
benefits
ever come up?
charges.
What?
The public benefits charge.
But that's a de minimis amount compared to
I
having
understand.
to
I
fix this and then have the customer switch. If we could notify customer, these are the ones we need to do. If you're considering a heat pump. We either want to avoid the expense of doing this or offer some, there may be some economics that work for both sides.
Yes, we
better.
could.
Mhm.
And let me do you one better. We could get rid of the entire $2.1 million project if we ceased serving propane valley-wide.
Well, yes, but that's,
I mean, how far down the rabbit hole we could? I mean,
I just meant, if we're
yes,
going
I-
into an
and
individual line.
yes.
There might be some merit.
How many homes are in play? Was it 10 or
we have
15?
443 propane connections.
No, but
throughout
the
the
way,
valley.
the way that need a new service, these laterals and that don't go.
I'm gonna look to Howard and Brandy on this. There are 160 lots roughly in KMA. Half built out?
Anything more than
Yeah.
that.
You think more than half? You think about 100 homes?
I think it's at least 80% built up.
80%. So, okay, so that takes us to. Okay, so it takes us to 144.
question
You're
is
thinking
how
it was,
many houses
so
are
144 homes,
All
roughly.
of them in KMA are in need of service line replacement.
They would be,
The advice of the lawyer, you referred to all of that.
unless it was a newer construction, of which we have some, the end of Winter Green, not end of Winter Green, end of Yarrow, we have the new lines that went in on
It's that most
that
of
was
it.
project. So there's some that will be.
It's not 10 houses, it's dozens.
Yeah, it's mean, if Howard says 80%, I believe him, so 144 is the number. Take away a few onesie twosies. Frank Watford is now on a private propane tank. Take away Noya that hasn't rebuilt. I mean,
It got taken away. Sorry. Okay. Yep, now I get it. It sounds like a more than off the wall idea to me. It sounds pretty.
yeah, no, I think that has merit. So we could offer that before, we do the
Merit
design.
pushes.
So. Snow removal. The
So, yeah, there's 140 current connections
in KMA.
in KMA.
Did you build that report for me already? I asked for it this morning and it sounds like he already did it. Thank you, Bob.
I didn't, there's 140 homes. Some of them may not have propane.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay. So one thing that is different than from last year, our red service truck that snow removal uses was red tagged. It's inoperable and non-repairable. We will have to replace that this year. We were going to replace it last year, but we're going to replace it this year.
Can I ask a stupid question here? Why do we need just a truck for snow removal?
That's how they install snow stakes. That's how they go around and review contracts. And
It's not the actual operation of.
I mean, it is linked to operation for snow stakes for sure. It's also used in construction too. It's the same truck that's used for construction. It's the same crew. They're half snow removal, half construction. But
Howard, do you have a question?
Could that be an electric vehicle?
it could be, but the board opted to save money by going to used internal combustion last year. That was one of the decisions that was made.
We did get one electric vehicle, but
We did get one
we
electric.
did get one electric truck.
Or electric propane, yes. And that's the.
So some enormous sale could influence the outcome, right?
Mhm. Crew cab with the body style, we need. Assuming all the other big entities that have to buy them, such as SMUD or City of Sacramento or City of San Francisco, don't buy them all up. They run north of 120 with the job boxes and the frame we need to do that. So that's the only thing that's different from last year.
Okay.
Cable, there's not a whole lot going on. We did buy a bunch of equipment last year, the new sound system and all that. So we don't have any anticipated expenditures for cable other than the normal. Parks and Rec, finish out the old gals project. Reminder for those that don't know, we have a 50% matching grant up to 28,000. And so once the project's completed, we'll receive 28,000 back from the state. And a retaining wall at the park to finish out the project from a couple of years ago that we just can't seem to get to, but this year we're hoping to get to it.
So is that $28,000 for the repair and replacement of the equipment? Is that then?
No, this is for the old gals project, which is the picnic tables right out here.
I see.
Yeah, and the cornhole and the
Gotcha.
airproof dumpster. That's what that was for, the concrete pads, et cetera. So if you walk out, have you been out? I don't know if you've been out there, but maybe not right now.
Not this winter, but
maybe
I saw them last summer. Yeah.
Perfect. Solid waste, we don't have any anticipated capital projects for solid waste this time. And then for shared asphalt repairs, the district engineer was up here this week and took a look at it. That number has gone up significantly since that meeting, as we talked about at ops, but this year's asphalt repair is going to go up significantly.
And that's asphalt, like on where exactly?
Any place the district has ownership and responsibility. So it's the Powerhouse Road.
Mhm.
It is, and then everything you see here.
Right.
And that is it. And a bit of the propane road, the little guy that goes cut his little hump there up by the propane tanks, that's ours too.
Not relative to the other roads that are in need of repair around here.
Yeah, I don't think any of our
The district has no
competitive.
responsibility, ownership, et cetera, for Afghanistan Meadows Road. So that's anyway. So AC is going to go up significantly. Think that was the only thing that's new. Is that's gonna go up for this year. Any questions on the shared?
Operation shared. I confess not to know what operation shared even means.
It means it's shared equipment between all the operational
Oh, so
departments.
it's like overhead.
No, it is not overhead.
Okay.
Like a truck that different departments use the
I
same
see.
truck.
Okay,
Is that-
Yeah. and then it gets allocated.
Or
so
these
that-
tables,
Yeah. Okay,
or, yeah,
all right.
that's it for capital. So, ops will look at this again with all these changes, and then it'll be back to the board again. Next month.
What is our deadline to finalize and approve? Is that with the
We've done them in
expense budget?
June. Yeah, we've done them in June, July, and August, and it's somewhere in that 3-month range.
We do
August,
it
I think,
together with the P and L. Okay.
or with the operations budget, correct?
We would want to approve it at the beginning of July.
Yeah, we
Board
usually
meeting?
do it, historically, that's our target, is to do it the summer festival board meeting, that
I
one.
see. Are we then done with this agenda item? Or
I think so.
because if so, before we do, I'd like to simply to again zoom out and ask of all of you, really, what are the most important questions or even because some things are not up for debate. Some of the big items like the wastewater treatment plant, we're not here to debate. Others perhaps are. So what are the swing decisions in this $13-14 million number that most stand out?
In my mind, it's making sure the number ones fit within the budget. If there's some room after that, discussion of number twos.
So look,
So we now have to match it to the operating budget.
And so what staff does is we go through and we get a wish list from the operators, and then management goes through and pares that down to what realistically we can afford. We've already pared this down to what we can live with, anticipated within each of the respective budgets. So we've already taken the scalpel to it. There's only been 1 year that I can recall, I think Eric was president, Bob, that we actually had to make some cuts because of unforeseen expenditures. And so we had to make some cuts, and we went through and picked the lines of what we could live without. I don't anticipate we need to do that because we're living within our means now. Whereas before, historically, all these funds ran in the red, and now we're running in the black of the
Yeah, I
funds.
mean, what we're looking at is the total capital replacement for the next year of 4.6 million. The majority of that is the wastewater treatment plant that's already financed.
uh-huh.
So this should fit.
Yes.
And if not, we'll fix it.
I mean, I suppose what I ought to do is go through and count up all the ones to see how much, well, the wastewater treatment plant will be A1, right? So there's some that are zero, so to speak. In other words, there's zero latitude. But if ones are at the top of our priority and wish list that we most hope to get through budget, how do they total up this year and over 5 years? And I probably just need to crunch a few numbers to see how much of the 13.9 million is still
Again,
up for
the
discussion.
13.9 is not,
That's a
that's an
5-year total.
indicator, but what matters is 24, 25,
Right,
which
okay.
is 4.6 million.
And how much of that number is discretionary, so to speak? Do we still have any say over? And how much of that number is a 1 or a 2 or a 5?
It's almost all one.
Ones, right?
It's almost all ones.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
we usually.
It's what staff believes we need to successfully operate.
I think there's only 2 twos that made it as recommendation from staff, but 2 in this next fiscal year is something we could live without, but we would have to do it at some point. So there's only, I think, so right now
Might be
there's
a one
only
next year.
ones in the budget,
So
except
that suggests that in the near term, like next year, it's almost all ones. The 3s and 5s are out in the distance.
correct. When
Okay.
we
But
think
they
they,
will
when we
become
think they will
ones.
hit,
In 3 years from now, they'll become ones because they're due to be
Sure.
serviced.
maybe depending on, or
Like-
if
like-
something
maybe not,
happens,
but like-
if something
Yeah.
bad happens,
Yeah.
a 5 could become a 1 next year.
Exactly.
But right now, our best guess, this is our best guess of our absolutely critical projects for next year.
Okay, and then if this has already come up, I apologize, but of next year's $4.x million, how much of that is already committed? How much of that is, I'll call it discretionary or even debatable.
I mean, the wastewater, I'd say the wastewater, so that's about 3 million of it it's under contract. That's
So there's
not
one point X million dollars that,
everything else.
okay.
1.6, you could
1.6
say
million.
is part of the high priority things.
Yeah.
That we annually need to
Okay.
improve. And the idea of 5 years is to have some visibility to what we're going to need in the future and how to plan for it.
And this feeds into rate studies ultimately at the end of the
Okay.
day.
Yeah.
Which is why we go out 5 years, because that's how long a rate study usually lives.
Still playing the newbie card. I promise not to ask these questions next March or April.
Okay, that's cool. All right, I think we're done with capital budget. And we're ready to move on to snow removal. Can you just let us know how many people are online?
There are 8 non-district employees online
Okay, thank you.
and
Show that.
Can we see names?
two members of the audience in at the district.
Who do we see there?
I had to go away for capital, but
Yeah. Okay,
So Eric and I are gonna obviously tag team on this and the staff reports and they're on item 90. But essentially, we've been approached by KMA, who, as you know, opted out of the snow removal services last year or this winter. And which created as you know, a unique situation across the snow removal contracts. And long story short is they're inquiring whether we would offer them the contract again for next season. So we reviewed this, and so Eric and I discussed that there's a couple different options that we can do, and maybe Eric, you'd like to talk about that.
yeah, so I think most important thing was to go back to what the board did when we had to triage and what decisions the board made as part of that. And so I highlighted those, what they were. And then in the recommendations, a lot of those were recommending reversal of those if the board were to want to offer a contract to KMA. And so specifically, so we discussed this a lot with snow removal staff, Joe, Spencer. Could we service KMA with this crew we have now and the equipment we have now? The answer was yes, if it's roads and parking pads only. That is the answer. Mainly because it's different staff. To Chris's question earlier this morning, thank you for that. The staff that does the tracklesses is a different subset of the snow removal crew that runs the big equipment. The really seasoned operators run the big equipment. They know what they're doing. That's the loaders, the blower, the blades. The young and less experienced crew, although we do have a couple that are multi-year and seasonal employees, which we appreciate very much. They generally run the tracklesses, which is driveways for the most part. Since we got the mid-size blower, we no longer have tracklesses doing the sides of the roads.
Is that the red one?
No, that's the McLean. I call them tracklesses, and I really shouldn't. We haven't come up with a better name. Rubber tired articulating snow removal device.
With an acronym. It's just-
Maybe I'll make an acronym. There's the challenge. Okay, we'll send it out to staff as a little contest.
Let's roll off tongue.
Yes, must roll off tongue. So that's one thing that staff is recommending. We would need their snow stakes to be brought to district standards. We've seen some stuff over the course of this last winter that definitely does not meet our standards, so that would have to occur. We're also very concerned about hydraulic fuel spills, oil spills from the staging of equipment and parking pads, and we would want indemnification from that. So if someone wanted to call the state for an oil slick going across the road from a pre-existing condition, we want no responsibility for that. And that pavement conditions be brought up to our standards, any repairs that need to be made to avoid damaging equipment. So that's specific to the contract. With regards to the changes the board made last year, that the G&A allocations would need to be reversed from what we did in September or October. The interphone loans, we're recommending deferring repayment so we don't have a one-off calculation. Because should KMA ever come back, they still have a portion of that debt that is theirs. And that in order to minimize staff time and expenses on our existing customers, snow removal customers, that we just keep it simple. We do two budgets, one with KMA under the conditions note that I just described, and two without KMA under the conditions adopted in September by the board.
So let me start out with some overall comments. First of all, I welcome the opportunity to service the whole valley. It's in everybody's interest in terms of having the fixed cost be shared across a wider base. So that can help everybody. I think we've made some significant improvements this year in how we manage the roads. And also in personnel. Personnel has been on site in advance of events and the rest of that. So I think our ability to service, obviously we've serviced this area in the past for multiple years, so we have a very good sense of what the labor cost or the time cost is likely to be. So I very much would like to see this happen. I think one change we need to make is when snow removal goes over budget, it has to be trued up. And we do that by taking out a loan. And I think we should take those loans and allocate them each year and keep those separate and not try to include it like we have in the past. That would make it clear in case there's another time in the future where somebody chooses not to renew, which is their right. I don't think there's any way to do this more than good faith and year to year, because we have no real way of recovering costs. The only way we could do multi-year is to build up a reserve and charge extra so we can cover ourselves in the future. All that does is make it not cost higher for people. So I would very much like to see this happen. I think in terms of the driveways, our biggest problem is the fact we would need another trackless. That's a lot of money. And there are at least two new services that operated this year. So if they can cover their driveways, or the owners want to do their own driveways, it's just that would be a huge capital cost to do. And I would do it. I agree that that really does not fit into what we can realistically do. So those are my opening thoughts, but I also welcome thoughts from any of the KMA members that are online.
Do you want to hear from the board first, or are we going to go to the audience comments?
Well, let's hear from the board comments and then go to, I see Larry has his hand
Yeah,
up.
he does.
I'd like to hear from him.
I mean, I would just, I want to, echo a lot of what Bob said and just say that, a lot of the reason that KMA seemed to have left is because of our quality of service. And I want to make sure that we are, in my hat as the communications committee chair, thinking about our communications and how we can welcome them back and tell them about how the changes that we've been making over the year, because they have not received our communications about the changes that we've been doing because they weren't our customer. So let's make sure that we communicate effectively, that we're excited to service them and make sure that we have good communication lines available with them and recognize what we're doing there. So I think that's one thing that comes to mind. But like Bob said, I think it's great to have the opportunity to show that we can be successful in that area again. I do have a couple of questions. I think I want to make sure I understand the interloan aspects of this, and because I think not specific to just this contract, but to all contracts. I brought this up, I think when this came up last year, was can we write multi-year, and Bob's saying that's hard. But I do want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up so if someone decides not to renew a year, that they cannot not pay the debt that they owe, that we have incurred on their behalf with this contract and all contracts that we write for this upcoming year. And if what I heard you say is that what we need to do is separate the operational side of it with the interloan side of it, then I think that that's something that would be helpful to think through, not just for this contract, but for all of our contracts.
So I'll answer that. When we offer a contract price, we will build in the interfund loan repayment into that. Now, what we're going to do this year that we haven't done in prior years is on the invoice, we're going to break that out as a separate line item to show it. To show this portion of your total bill is this year's portion of your interfund loan repayment. Okay.
Right.
The other thing we're going to include is snow stakes on the same invoice, but that's not germane to what you had asked.
Right.
I do have a very cumbersome spreadsheet that is tracking each particular customer's portion of indebtedness.
Right.
Based on their portion of the year it was incurred and what
Right.
the contract allocation was, because it varies, right?
Right.
Depending on the year we took the loan. So that calculation is done and exists. I know exactly what each customer, each HOA owes in terms of the overall indebtedness.
Are they obliged to pay it if they were to leave the balance due?
No, but if they were to come back, I know how much of that they owe.
I guess my question is.
Yeah, exactly.
But if they left and left for good,
Well, but I guess, I don't want to be put in a situation where someone could have hundreds of thousands of debt. I mean, not that they'd have
Sure.
lots of debt and then they never come back. I would say we took a loan on your behalf and you can leave, but you still owe us.
Let me just
Would you-
suggest in the interest of time that one of the
Sorry.
policies we should work on for this year is what to do with the indebtedness.
if I could
Authority.
suggest, Bob, what
Yeah.
I'll do, if the consensus of the board is such, I will reach out to Josh, district council, and say, can you craft a paragraph in this upcoming year's contract to acknowledge your portion of the old debt and your responsibility for that, plus any future debt incurred on your behalf. I can reach out to Josh and have him craft that.
Yeah.
Does that
Yes.
satisfy?
Well, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I've got a number of thoughts on this. And
Have you finished your thoughts?
Yes,
Well,
that
okay.
addresses
All
my
right.
concern. Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Good.
Chris, go
I
ahead.
like it. Thank you.
I am confused as to why a 3-year, for example, agreement does not work. Related to that, you made a couple of points about if there is excess cost, say due to heavy snows, how does one, you mentioned debt or loan or what have you. I hazard a guess if there are more than 2 resident or community members listening in on this call, then I am not alone in needing a remedial on allocation and interfund debt. If you could just take a minute to remind us how that works, especially relative to snow removal. What does that even mean? These allocation, I presume, is the allocation of overhead costs to each. Okay, so please do explain that. And in the interest of time, the very fact that we're discussing this really does beg the question that I discussed with you offline, Eric. Namely, how qualified is this query? Is this just a guy taking, the HOA taking a flyer, or are they genuinely in need of a coming back to us as a vendor? I don't think we should be wasting time doing split budgets or even talking about all this unless they are really serious about coming back, and there will be a price for them to pay to come back. But with all that said, what do you think?
Well, as your last question first, yes, it will take time to prepare a split budget. But while I'm doing it, it usually takes me, because snow removal is such a heinous beast, takes me about a day to prepare a budget. So add another 4 hours to this. You're not talking significant cost to do the split budget. So address that one first. Interfund loans are interesting. So with regards, and I'm just going to talk about snow removal, I'm not going to talk about generically interfund loans, but with regards to snow removal, there have been 3 loans made from electric to snow removal.
I see.
One in 2019, one in 2020. There was a payment in 2021, a repayment, and then another loan in 2023. In each of those respective years,
Just roughly how much money are we talking? Just roughly.
right now the total indebtedness is $164,797. We adjust that quarterly based on the late apportionment rates, which is the interest that the board set to use for the debt repayment.
In simple terms, does this mean that the snow removal business borrowed from our other businesses to
Electric.
the tune of electric to the tune of about 160,000 over a couple of years?
Is paying interest.
And is
Yeah, at principal and interest, 164,000.
Okay.
Principal plus interest, yes.
okay.
Principal was 158 principal total borrowed was
That's okay.
208,000 with a
I
$50,000
don't mean to
repayment.
put you on the spot.
No, I have it right here, so I'm happy to give it to you. So
How
in
much,
each of those-
how much of that was caused by the KMA's decision a year ago?
none,
None. Okay.
none.
Go. Sorry. Go ahead.
So in each of those respective years, we took loans. There was an apportionment rate between all the contracts. Billy Joe Bob had 5%, Ricky Bobby had 20%. So I assigned that portion of the indebtedness of that year, 5% to Billy Joe Bob and 20% to Ricky Bobby.
These are different HOAs.
Yes, and then in the next, when the next loan was taken, I looked at the apportionment rate that year. I assigned it respective to how much they had of the total contracts and so on. So I am tracking very exactly what each HOA portion of the debt is. So I know exactly, I can tell you the
Sorry.
Lava Rock portion, which is us, we owe 2966 of the 164,000. That's our portion of the total.
Just in general, why does snow removal need to borrow from another fund? It's presumably because it was a really rough winter and we ran out over budget.
That's snow removal is a contract service that we are under no obligation to provide. Therefore, it cannot use any other funds except for a loan. It can't take property taxes. It can't. You know,
Right.
it basically it has to be a standalone fund, and when it doesn't stand alone, it has to borrow money
If it loses money.
if it loses money.
So in other words, if it's a heavy winter, if we have staffing problems, if the price of this or that go up, then we have to, the snow removal has to do an interfund loan.
Correct.
Do we have, are we in the black if you go over like 5-6 years? I mean, are we in the, we're always in the red?
Not always in the red. We've been in the red.
In other words, we're not charging the HOAs enough, maybe in general.
Well, I mean,
We don't add a buffer to it. We try to
Right.
do as accurate as possible estimate of what it's going to cost. And then that's allocated out.
And we
And
have
if-
no kickers, like the HOA, last year's heavy snow, Rick, for example, the HOAs paid no excess price.
We used to call it a snowy day fund, but a
Or is that the
long
tier
time
pricing?
ago, we used to give credits back to the HOAs, and we
Exactly.
didn't put money into capital. That all caught up to us when we got tractors that had over 200 hours on them. Pretty soon we had to start
Yeah,
rebuilding the inventory equipment. And then we have a big heavy snow year, all of a sudden we're in the hole. So.
I
that's
just
what-
remember once as being the HOA person for East Meadow snow removal, before we worked with PUD, working with a contractor where there were snowfall in inches targets, and then there were kickers up, you know, if snow is more than,
Mhm.
and then that all fell, of course, to the HOA budget, but
We're-
PUD does not.
We're
structure
trying
its
to
con-
do it at a fixed predictable cost, and sometimes it doesn't
In
come
an
in that way.
unpredictable,
And so
season.
as opposed to building in a buffer, we borrow going forward. That's the current policy. We could,
Not quite.
Not-
We are, when we have large expenditures coming, we do, if you look,
Yeah.
when you guys will eventually see the operating budget, we do try to build a buffer in capital so that when we get to an expense, we have some money to pay. So we're
Right.
trying to build reserves now, but very slowly because the board has been very sensitive to price. And, you know, quite frankly, snow removal is the one fund where politics beats finance. And that's,
because politics beats finance.
yeah, sound financial decisions are not made in the interest of,
I see.
you know, the political climate.
That people resist, the HOAs resist high snow removal costs. Is that the political climate? I don't know. Anyway,
can we see if, Peter, do you have any questions before we open it up for
No,
audience feedback? Okay. Thanks. Why don't we, since Larry has his hand up, why don't we start?
Yeah, thank you for entertaining this question.
the speaker is, I'm sorry,
Summarized it.
Larry Parker.
resident of HO. Oh,
Larry Parker.
Thank you.
President of KMA.
Thank you.
Yeah, I reached out to Rick a few weeks ago. And long story short, let's just say we learned a lot walking in your shoes. And would be interested. We haven't made any decisions, but we would like to consider going back to KMPUD snow removal. And we're eager to get some cost estimate. It doesn't have to be within 5% would help. Doesn't have to be precise. And to summarize multiple reasons for trying to do this on our own. One was that it was the only way we thought we could stay within our limits of 20% increase in our budget. Yeah, it would take a vote of a majority of the homeowners to increase annual assessments by over 20%. And we knew that would not work. We can't get 51% to approve hardly anything. Anyways, and then there was a question about multi-year contracts. That's also in our CC&Rs or governing that are a majority of all the homeowners to approve a multi-year contract. The board can't enter a contract more than a single year. And then the last point I would like to put in another request, which might be a win-win, since KMPUD does not want to do KMA driveways, which I understand. Some of our driveway contractors might be interested in leasing garage space on Loop Road if possible. And that could be another revenue stream, assuming there might be there. That's all I had.
Larry.
Okay, Larry, thank you very much.
Larry, does the roads only approach? Could that conceivably satisfy the KMA?
Roads and pads,
Pads.
I think we could work around that, and there are, some entities that are businesses that could handle driveways in theory, but the garage space is a challenge. Trying to do it on a parking pad with no utilities connected to it is challenging.
Well, Larry, I just want to say thank you very much for reaching out, and we want to find a way to make this really work well and have everybody be happy. So that's our mission, and we appreciate your reaching out.
Yeah, thank you for the discussion of it, and I'd like to keep up this discussion and have a better understanding of what the ultimate cost will be,
Right.
and if we have options.
Yeah, and I think one issue for knowing the cost is until we close out this year, we don't know what our final labor costs are. And so without the ability to predict snow, we provide service through May 15th. And so until we reach that date, we don't know for sure, or until the snow forecast reaches that date, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, and until we reach June 30th, we don't know our final cost. We will estimate our final month as we always do when we prepare the operational budget based on where we think we're going to end up. We always have to make that assumption. We just don't know. But until we actually close out the month of June, which doesn't happen until the end of July, we don't know what our actual costs, final costs were. And we still are doing stuff sometimes in June and snow removal, snow stakes, for example, that are still too buried that we can't get out. We've got about 80% out, I think, is what Joe said. So we're ahead of schedule, as Peter noted. Yeah. But just because of the snow being gone, no, we won't know those finals until we get to the final.
We're going to do whatever we can, give it a range. And that's
correct. We will have a very dialed in plus or minus 5% where we think we're going to end up by the time the board adopts the operational budget. And that's been generally true for the last decade.
Yeah.
What is our assessment of how the
so Larry, is there anything else, any other comments you wanted to add in?
No, I think I hit the high points. Yeah, I could go on and offline with Rich or something to
All right.
learn more about the loan and our obligation, and we're going to get horsed up on that.
Okay, great. Thank you for your comments then. I'm sorry.
What is our assessment, maybe this is for Rick, of how the winter went in general, high level?
You know, as you know, the snow cooperated this winter. The storm cycles there were breaks between storm cycles,
Right.
which allowed us to catch up and clean up and do things. We have a lot of return staff. We added the mid-size blower. So overall, operationally, I think it went really well. There are going to be the few that say, you know, I want my service now, you know, they demand service upon request, and we do the best we can. But overall, over the last several years, I thought this year went pretty well.
Is there a time, is there a board meeting at which we recap the season, report on how the snow removal season went? Everything you just touched on, labor, equipment, snow density, and all of that. Do we recap the year? I know you've come to HOAs and presented, those are to the customers, but here on the board, do we recap with any report?
Typically, no, only unless it's one of those years where everything falls apart. Then the board typically directs staff to come back with a report and tell us why and what you're going to do to change it and or improve for next year. So
I believe it's a useful agenda item to almost in the form of a stress test. I mean, is it simply that the snowfall was as it was, that we got through relatively well? What were the level of complaints when we refer to customers who have, you know, maybe misguided expectations about our SLA? You know, what were the complaint rates compared to previous years? Yeah, I just don't, I lack a feel for whether we just whistled past the graveyard, got lucky with good weather, or whether we really, I mean, I want to believe that it was our staffing changes, our equipment changes, and that we could have handled even more snow than we got. But when the board packet says, and Eric, we talked about this separately, but I'll just repeat it. When the board packet says the staff believes that the roads can be handled, not the driveways, but the roads and pads with existing staff, that would raise eyebrows, I think, among a lot of our customers who, even observing roads, just have different expectations. You've heard them, and maybe it's a communications job to let them know, Doug. You know, we talk about this in comms, to let them know more what the expectation should be. But you know, there are mornings when people wake up and they cannot get in or out of Kirkwood, out of their homes. So
I just want to push back on that statement because we have done the roads in KMA for many, many years. We know exactly what it takes and what the obstacles are. So the confidence level that the roads can be done well, I think is very high. Now you run into situations where the snow, we don't run 3 shifts. We don't run 24 hours a day. We estimate when the snow is going to fall and try to have the shift match up to that, but the snow sometimes doesn't cooperate. So how it falls in a 24-hour period might mean that it takes 24 hours until that road is clear because the crew has already worked 12 hours and we're not going to put them out there, you know, when they're tired and when it isn't appropriate. So sometimes the snowfall doesn't line up with when the plows happen, but they're out there at 4 a.m. in the morning. And if the snow doesn't show up until midnight.
Well, this is not to be critical of our staff.
Well, it sounds like you are.
No, but Bob, we have to acknowledge that there is a significant customer voice, several customers who would say that we barely got, I mean, just in East Meadows, for example, our second largest client after KMA, if I'm not mistaken, in snow removal. So our largest client without KMA would say there were days in this winter, despite what I think Rick called relatively cooperative snowfall, thank you, gods, where road clearance was not good enough, did not meet expectation, or maybe it was good enough, but if we had to share it with a larger customer, then it would not have been good enough. I'll just use that vague term to express some sort of SLA. We don't have an SLA. Our written policy is we can't promise because it's Kirkwood, it's snow. But we can't hide from the fact that there are customers who'd say, we don't have the capacity to bring KMA back on and simply say, oh, with existing staff and equipment, I mean, next year could be more like last year. And so let's at least acknowledge that there's a customer sentiment that feels that way.
I think it's a gross injustice to our staff and a gross overstatement to say a significant portion of East Meadows was discontent with service this year. That is
No,
not.
that's
No,
not
that's what you said.
No,
I'm gonna finish.
Eric, what
I'm
I
gonna
said that
finish,
there were
Chris.
days. There were like rare days, but still.
That's not what you said. Please watch the video. That is not true. That there was significant. There are a dozen chronic complainers in the East Meadows, and they're going to complain in the best years and in the worst years. We get that. But the positive feedback that we've received, particularly from East Meadows, far outweighed the chronic complainers. So I dispute your statement,
That's
and
great to
I
hear.
will. I hope you
And-
would apologize to our snow removal staff, because I'm sure they would take that very personally.
Happy to speak candidly and fairly to any and all staff. I already do. But just to that point, could we get some insight into the customer comments? I guess there will be a survey, but
Just
this is the first
Just
I've
know
heard
that
of.
staff feels like we are always under a microscope with snow removal. It's been that way since I started with the district. So if you would like more information than what we provide in every single board meeting in the winter and have a recap of the winter, then the board can direct this, but this is not on the agenda. So I suggest that if you'd like to bring that back as an agenda item, we could do that, but
I would love to have an agenda item at the next board meeting that recaps the season in snow. And by all means, let's make it super positive. If there's a lot of customer praise, then, and I don't disbelieve that there is. Let's please surface that.
Okay.
Because whatever number of chronic complainers, they do make more noise than those who don't. It's always like that in every consumer business. And so if there's a lot to celebrate, let's see it.
Okay, so is there a motion to adopt, or is there further questions on this agenda item, which is to direct staff to develop two budgets with and without KMA under this set of conditions?
Yes, I move that we adopt staff recommendation, and if Eric says it's reasonable to do double budget, then by all means, I propose that.
I want to amend that because I want to make sure we capture the concept that I brought up with the additional language. So I would be motioning that moving with the two proposals in addition to additional language. With
To-
Indebtedness.
Yeah, how to handle indebtedness, options for handling indebtedness.
Correct.
Oh,
That would be my motion.
is that okay with you? Is there
Oh,
an
yeah.
adjustment? Okay, is there any further conversation? All right, then roll call.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
Doug second.
No, he made
I made
a
a
separate motion to amend,
second
which
motion.
means.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't listen carefully. Okay. There's,
I'll second that.
okay, yes, there is a second. Thank you for catching that. Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, good.
Are you gonna take more comments from the public?
There's no other,
No other hands were
no
raised.
other hand
No, no,
raised.
no.
I'd be happy to, but I didn't see any other
How did
hands.
you want to make?
I was just gonna say, I mean, I think one thing, I don't know how things went in East Meadows. But I think
They went well.
Okay. I think one thing that just talking to people within KMA, I mean, because we had some people complaining, other people praising, but the feedback that I got was most important relates to that problem about getting out of your house. And not that I don't want to say anything pro or con about the contractor that we had in KMA this season, but the one thing he did that seemed to make people happy was he came through with a quick pass as quickly as he could every street. In other words, the highest priority was just making it so people have a chance to get out. Now, so as long as everybody feels like they're being being given a chance to get out of their, they may have to do a lot of digging to get from their house to the street where there's only basically, it's, barely good enough for fire protection, and it'd be hard, but at least it lets people get out in the morning. That seemed to be the thing that made people the happiest. Good, so I don't know if that's the way the PUD operated this year or not, but that seemed to be the one thing.
Before we leave this topic, I'll make very clear my position on snow removal, and I speak for myself and I speak for constituents who talk to me, is that in East Meadows, the general satisfaction was high. What I said earlier is that, of course, there are peak days where one wishes it were better. And generally there is a sense that there's not an understanding of whether we got lucky with weather and whether we could have withstood anything close to what we had last year. And maybe we could, maybe we couldn't, but there's not a sense of confidence or insight that staff, equipment, and everything else would have withstood a heavier storm. So I want to be very clear there. This is not a criticism of staff nor management on how the thing went. I think generally people were satisfied. Chronic complainers will complain. Enough said.
Okay, moving on to 9F then. Crooked Volunteer Fire Department organizational structure options.
I think we'll tag team this
Yeah.
one as well.
First part.
Sure. So at the last meeting, the board directed staff to explore and present options for budgeting, staffing, and the organizational structure to enable full and part-time professional staffing for fiscal year 24-25. So in consultation with district council, as well as CalPERS, we looked at the options of how we could do this. So the first, we are prohibited from having paid safety employees as defined by CalPERS, which would be paid firefighters in our case. In order to create those positions, we have to send proposed duty statements to CalPERS, which we've done. They have 30 days to review it, which they have not done. And then they make a determination if we fall within their safety, CalPERS safety, which is a different retirement than is provided to other employees' guidelines. And then we would have to pay CalPERS to complete evaluation for an amendment to our contract. And then the board would have to approve a resolution to execute the contract. What we found out is under this structure, which we did not know, any new employee in the eyes of CalPERS would be unvested in the CalPERS PEPRA program, which was passed, Public Employee Pension Reform Act, which was passed quite a few years, 2018, I believe is when it went into effective January. So in other words, and to put it as simple terms as possible, Rick is fully vested in CalPERS Classic. He has his years of service in CalPERS Classic. I don't know how many years you're up to now.
Classic meaning the
Meaning
non-emergency,
the one we have now.
Okay,
The
sure.
program we have for all employees right now. He's fully vested. He has many years of service. If we were to execute this contract and hire Rick as fire chief, he would lose all those years of service, and he would start from scratch in PEPRA at year 0. Not a terribly attractive thing. I think anyone with a brain can see that. But it would take 5 years to vest under the new program. That's the vesting requirement for PEPRA in that program. Additionally, if we went to CalPERS PEPRA, we're suddenly competing with the big boys. We're competing with San Mateo Fire. We're competing with South Lake Tahoe Fire. We're competing. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I know in Amador County, the people that commute to the Bay Area as firefighters, 4 on, 3 off, or 3 on, 4 off, and make Bay Area money, and they come home to Amador County. We would have to compete with that salary because we would be in CalPERS PEPRA if we went with CalPERS PEPRA. So
This is, I really
I want
want
to stop there because that's
yeah.
a lot.
I really want to understand this because I'm not by any stretch a CalPERS expert in any way. So I want to make sure I'm going to ask some stupid questions here.
Okay.
So, and I will say like the sentence about like the TAC, I was a little bit sensitive of because I was like, I thought we had considered some of these things. So if I come off at all defensive, I apologize in advance. But that the TAC did not consider salary. We try to, but I'm trying to, maybe it's different.
We did consider salary in light of the
Cal's
lost money in retirement. you did not consider that. And that was because we didn't know it at the time.
Right, okay, so that's what I'm trying to understand is, I thought we did a good job, so I'm just trying to
This
do
you didn't know, so how could you
Yeah,
have done it?
okay.
That's, so this is
So-
no
so-
way a jab attack, because
Yeah,
this was unknown until just recently when we met with CalPERS at the direction of the board.
So what you're saying is that if we had, in a perfect world, we could just live under our CalPERS Classic and we could just shift people, hire a new person, whatever, under the same program. And is the issue that the CalPERS Classic, the amount of benefit or the amount of that cost to us is significantly different than the CalPERS Pepra, in that it's more, is that what you're saying is the attractiveness of what we're competing against? Or I'm trying to understand like
Sure.
that nuance here.
Happy to answer that. So CalPERS Classic is no longer offered. CalPERS Classic ended January 1st of 2018, unless you were already a CalPERS Classic member.
And that's to members or
To
agencies?
Yes. Agencies are members, employees are not members. Employees are employees of CalPERS agency,
Okay.
member agencies. So in short, CalPERS Classic ceased to exist for new employees hired that were not previously CalPERS employees hired after January 1st, 2018. You came into something called PEPRA. PEPRA has a completely different structure than CalPERS Classic. And the reason it has a different structure is because CalPERS Classic at the time was basically going bankrupt. Their pensions were outstripping their investments. They've made a lot of changes since then, including the district has to pay unfunded subsidy quarterly payments to CalPERS. We pay them for the unfunded liability of CalPERS Classic. We don't pay an unfunded liability for PEPRA members.
Okay.
So they've righted the ship because they basically cut it off and started charging some more money.
So
Okay,
people we
for
hired,
Classic.
and
So right now there's out of our 19 employees, 8 are Classic,
okay,
11 are not.
gotcha.
And I'm sure this is true for Amador County as well. Supervisor Brown nodding his head, so appreciate that. And so what becomes attractive to people? So one, if we were CalPERS Classic, that's like the most attractive. So firefighters, if you were in CalPERS before 2018, you could move to another agency that's still CalPERS and you're still Classic. Okay, you can do that. If you already were, you are till the end of days.
And so is the issue then we're creating something new and therefore it is now new? And now
Yes,
it's post 2018, and so now it's a new employee coming into the new thing and they have to go into the PEPRA
Right.
version of the CalPERS.
right. And the other thing is there's a mandated employee contribution of 7%, which CalPERS Classic is not paying. So now you're taking a 7% hit on your salary immediately when you go into PEPRA.
People usually compensated differently because of a Classic versus a PEPRA salary typically.
Correct. So PEPRA salaries are generally going to be higher than Classic salaries.
See. Okay.
Sure, there's other question there I've since forgotten, but
No, well, I'm just. Okay.
process it.
And so you're saying that, so when you're talking about the competitiveness of this, I guess one of the things that I saw it noted in, I don't want to just jump around, but like I saw it noted here, but I guess when I'm thinking about the formation of a new entity, why wouldn't the competitiveness of a salary be the exact
That's a
same?
great question.
Good
Let me answer
segue.
that question. That's a very simple question to answer.
Okay.
Very simple. And I'm going to use Chief Withrow from Amador Fire Protection District as my example. He retired after 21 years
Yeah.
with
Cal
CAL
Fire.
Fire. And then he took a job with AFPD. AFPD is not in CalPERS. Therefore, he can collect his retirement from CAL Fire and his salary set based on his last highest whatever at CAL Fire. And he can collect a salary from AFPD as a chief because it's not in CalPERS. If you are in CalPERS so let me say it. So that's the attractiveness of a non-CalPERS entity.
So we can create we don't, so.
Well,
Okay, go ahead.
I'm gonna, it's just because I think I'm on a roll.
Do it.
If you are CalPERS and you retire, you can only work for another CalPERS entity 960 hours per year. And still be a retired annuitant is what it's called.
Yeah.
You can be that. If Rob had left CAL FIRE and had gone to City of Jackson, which is CalPERS, all of a sudden he's not retired anymore and his retirement stops and he's now working more years. So another way of looking at it, So if you can't, if you retire from CalPERS, you can't go to CalPERS agency again and work more than 160 hours without starting all over. And you might have to repay some of your retirement you may have already taken. So the attractiveness is I can be a retired chief collecting my pension from CAL FIRE, and I can be collecting a salary as chief working, in the county I grew up in and helping my community out. That's the attractiveness of a non-CalPERS entity.
And
the salary can be less because it doesn't affect, because you're still getting a retirement, but it's not a CalPERS salary. You're getting, I'm assuming AFPD does a 457 or something, or a 401k for their employees. So they're still collecting some sort of pension retirement benefit, but they're not losing what they already had. They're collecting that as well. So basically you're augmenting your income with a full-time job and still collecting your full retirement, which in some cases can be 100% of your salary.
Right. And then the if and only if here is that, to have like in the former case, you have to be in CalPERS because we are already CalPERS. So we can't not hire someone who is in CalPERS. Like we can't in our current structure. I guess what I'm saying is what it sounds like is a formation of entity doesn't have to enter into CalPERS. Like that's
correct.
We like to have a safety personnel is not a requirement to be in CalPERS.
Correct.
And so that in terms of option number 2, that is true. But it sounds like if we did option 1, there is no world in which we could hire someone in our current formation of the KMPUD outside of CalPERS.
That is correct.
And so you'd have to amend the contract, become a safety CalPERS agency. So we'd have a water district, a safety district, PEPRA. And the final point that he was saying was, when we do that, we're competing with everybody else. So we would have to match basically labor costs with the Amador Fire Protection District, with Lake Valley, even to be competitive for a firefighter to work for us, because we could hire them at a certain rate, but it's going to be a revolving door. They're going to jump ship and go to the city of Roseville or San Francisco or somewhere else and make more money.
But even though, are clearly the responsibilities would be very different in Kirkwood's fire department compared to city of Sacramento. Like
They're a firefighter.
Yeah.
Period. No matter what they're doing, whether they're sitting in a lazy boy all day long or they're going to 37 calls, they're a firefighter. So, yeah, I think there's an opportunity to hire like newer recruits, just like Lake Valley does, just like Amador Fire Protection does, to get them here. But know that we're going to be probably going through a lot of firefighters. We'll never have, a crew that's going to last for very long, just because it's very competitive, and firefighting is now, it's typically fire departments are having a challenge hiring people to be firefighters. And then if you get paramedic and start adding more to your certification, you can make some pretty good money, especially in overtime. So point being is I think there's an avenue to hire people. It's just going to be a bit of a challenge.
And so so I've been trying to think about when reading the document in terms of a couple of dimensions of like cost to implement either or any of these, speed to implement, blockers to any of our financing options. You had outlined some of the potential questions in the formation, for example. One I didn't see mentioned in there was like the 50C3 necessarily. Like, does that matter necessarily in terms of like how that could contribute to any of these in terms of whether we form a pivot?
Oh, is your question, could the 501c3 contribute to a new entity?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. They
We
can
can rewrite
contribute. Yes.
Okay. I don't want to be specific. I'm just trying to think about across these dimensions.
Short answer, yes, as long as it's within the adopted corporate mission statement,
Yep.
which another firefighting entity would be.
Okay. And I guess my question is, it sounds like what you're saying is that there's a cost savings potentially, given all those other things that I'm asking about of like, speed and cost of doing all these things.
Yeah.
There is a potential cost savings, in your opinion, of having a formation of a new entity, because we would be basically we would be looking for people who are already in CalPERS retired, who we would not have to pay their CalPERS benefits, and they would be amicable to joining this entity in the sense of at a more affordable rate because they are retired and already, having a pension.
Yes, sort of. Said another way. a retired firefighter looks to entities that are not in CalPERS so as not to affect the pension
Sure.
they are already drawing.
So by having us be non-CalPERS, there is a smaller subset,
Yes.
let's say, of potential candidates, because again, that's opportunity to hire here. It is a challenge in the competitiveness, and we'd have to pay more, but there are way more firefighters that would probably be in that bucket than retired.
No, we pay less we would pay less wages under the new entity.
That's what I'm saying.
We would pay more under CalPERS, PEPRA.
I'm saying there's more people
More people to hire under the CalPERS, PEPRA,
that are
yes.
more people that are more expensive under the
Right.
PEPRA, fewer that are less expensive to
Yes,
hire under the new formation.
that is exactly correct.
And that's what I'm trying to say is like, I don't know who's out there. Okay.
So, but bringing in the other option of, going through LAFCO, creating our own special district or our own CFD,
Right.
having its own separate board. How is that board funded? They can't collect property tax?
And that's that's the question. So skipping out of CalPERS for a second.
Right.
To the new entity, district council is not convinced that this is an option for us. It would require significant research because he's unaware that a special unlike the county, which is a very different set of, government code, that we can even do this. So it's going to take a lot of attorney time and attorney money to determine if we can even do the new entity. And so that if we go down that option, that is the very first step and everything else needs to halt. Because if we can't do it, then now we're down to option 1 and option 3. So I don't want to get too far down the path of the new entity until.
Understood. Yeah, understood. I
But
appreciate
your
that.
questions are germane.
Yeah.
I can't answer them because
Yeah.
not even district council knows because it's not been done before that he's aware of in California.
Can you explain how this whole topic maps to TAC as the community last heard about it? Is, if I understood correctly, it's a new wrinkle or requirement or concern, or is
No,
does
I
it
mean,
fit right in?
So at the last board meeting, we as a board voted to guide. I made a motion, and it was in the minutes at the top of this document we can go back to, which had, I think, 4 or 5 bullet points in it. And one of them was asking staff to think about how would we organize, like how functionally, like how can we operate and have a paid fire chief? We do not operate in that way today. And so what staff has come back with is we have now looked into this. Here are the challenges we're facing that we have to decide
So
between.
this was one of the next steps
This is what
coming out of TAC.
TAC.
And should we expect a staff or a management recommendation of these various options? Because I don't see one. I think I
Well, the next
infer
step is that
one, but
board should direct staff, actually. It
Okay.
says right here.
that's what I see, but
So I think that's the conversation here is that we have to vote on this.
Yeah.
And we have to decide on how we're going to guide staff and what to do. And that's why I try to understand as
Yeah.
much as I can about these different trade-offs.
That makes
Because
sense.
they are, like, if we vote on this today, we are going to say, do this, spend lawyer time and money, spend staff time and money to think about this, and it could be a dead end. But it might not be, and that might be, again, what I just summarized in a lot of ways there was there's a lot of firefighters that could be paid more and potentially, or we pay them less, as Rick said, but they would probably be more of a revolving door. And so there's a wider scale of there, but they'd be in that PEPRA's CalPERS, or we try to go the route of an entity that's not in CalPERS. And it sounds like there would be fewer retired firefighters out there who might want to take a more decreased wage, perhaps relative to
Yeah,
the
no, I get
market.
is it appropriate to ask management a recommendation, or is that not appropriate?
Well, there's a couple of things just to make sure we
sure.
hit all the bases. One was that board directed us to continue to consider contract services for the fire department.
Yeah.
Which we've done in the past with the Amador Fire Protection District, and so
Yeah.
we are continuing to talk to them. The initial reaction from the entities are they could possibly, Amador maybe not so much, they haven't changed their mind, they're still not able to do it, but if the price was right, I'm sure they would, just like if we wanted to pay a lot of money for CAL FIRE. Someone suggested during the fire forum and the survey that we should use Forest Service. That's not in their wheelhouse. They don't provide interface fire protection services typically like we would need. And then the other entity would be Eastern Alpine County. They have a new fire chief. Initially, they were sort of receptive, but they kind of backed away. But we'll go back to them and ask them if they are interested in maybe a contract service, just so we can
Eastern,
satisfy
let's
the
see,
board.
Eastern Alpine, we're Western Alpine, right? Is that correct?
We are Kirkwood.
Oh, yeah, okay.
In Alpine County.
Where's the?
Eastern Alpine County is Woodford's Marketville.
Oh, okay, so it's, okay,
It's
yeah.
downhill.
Put in is where the three boundaries.
Oh, yeah, no. I know, I thought, wait, are we east or west? Is it the furthest away? So I also heard mention of Jackson, and Jackson, of course, is right in the heart of, are there other entities other than AFPD and Eastern Alpine to which we might logically, no?
Yeah.
There's only two. That we
Cal
can.
Fire.
No, there's only two. AFPD has said no. Eastern Alpine has said probably no, and Cal Fire.
Right, okay.
Well, yeah, they were lukewarm about it. I don't say they said no.
It would cost a lot because you'd have
It would
to,
cost a lot.
what we would want, they would require. It was
Right.
one of those things.
Right.
We would love minimal staffing. They would require battalion chief, at least 2 firefighters, one of them be an engineer. And it would be just cost prohibitive for us to do. Therefore, we dove into, what if we paid our own firefighters? And so this is the path that we're taking.
And bear in mind, Cal Fire will be more expensive than AFPD too.
Oh.
They'll start low, don't worry.
Yeah.
But then it's the subsequent. They ask any entity that's ever gone with Cal Fire, they've always regretted it. And we've talked to a lot of them.
Including infrastructure facilities.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Do any of these options impact how the work that people could do while they're here in terms of if they were a contract service, is it different than if they were, an entity versus CalPERS in terms of like, can they do other like shared resources across like all the budget, like could they do other things or does that matter for any of these scenarios?
no, they couldn't cross over and do snow removal unless it was for their own facility here. They'd have to stay within their job description, their scope.
Otherwise, the job would not be approved by PERS as a classified safety person. If it was.
Exactly.
But if it's your own entity, then you're not in PERS. So why couldn't they then do other things?
One word, union.
Union and safety, they're
Yeah,
considered
union.
safety employees.
Yeah, union. I don't think there's a fire shop out there that's not union. And they are very strong.
Okay. Oh, that's a lot of questions. Sorry.
You ran out of questions, really?
I didn't run out. I just said, I've asked Eric. I didn't run out. I said I've asked a lot. I will yield.
Stop it.
Yeah.
What is the time frame or the urgency for deciding this? Is it quite urgent, I assume? or-
Well, it's stuck until we decide this. There's no way to know how to move forward. So it's time to decide.
I think we need to defer on this and get more information.
What other information are we going to get?
I'm not ready to vote on it, either yes or no. Just be honest with you.
We either need to direct staff to get the specific information. The biggest one is whether property taxes collected by distributed by PMD could be passed on to this other entity
I'm sorry, distributed by,
by us. Could we allocate some of our property taxes and pay this and pass it on to this new entity?
some of the property taxes PUD receives back from the 2 or 3 counties?
Right.
Yeah,
Which
the
are-
money,
which-
the
which are de minimis
$200,000 we currently collect in tax approximately and use for the fire department. If the fire department were a different entity, could we pass that money on?
And in addition, like if we formed the 218 process, could that money, making sure all of the money that we would need to collect to fund this separate entity, can it be paid that way? You already said the 501c3, so that's okay. That one's already checked off.
I mean, that's the
main question, right?
That's the main
blocker.
question. So we either want to authorize answering that question, or there's no new information.
You have someone who's raising.
Yeah, Carol, I keep seeing your hand go up and down. I acknowledge you're there, but the board's discussing and then they'll open up to public comment. So you're first in line.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of am with Bob on this and that, like, we have to get answers to, it seems like there's an appeal. I guess maybe one other question are these mutually exclusive? Like, suppose we went down the route of a formation of a new thing. Could we then, like, have we blocked ourselves out of cow? Like, we could hire someone, I imagine, out
No.
of the CalPERS pepper, it doesn't.
The entity AFPD could decide to go CalPERS if they wanted at some point.
We won't.
I know, but you could make that decision
We
later.
could,
Yeah.
we don't have the money for it.
Yeah, no,
Flat out.
exactly.
Okay, so sorry, anyway, but anyway, my point is that I feel like the second option of a formation of an entity, we kind of know the CalPERS one. We have a pretty good idea of the contract services of what our options are. What we don't know is the formation of a new entity. And the answer might be, yeah, you can do it. This is how you do it. And that might be that seems like a good option, relatively speaking.
Well, yeah,
I mean, it's not, Peter, I think to your concern, we're not making a decision. We're figuring out how to make a decision because we don't have all the
Right.
information. That's
Right.
all we would be doing with Josh, is to have him go down the rabbit hole of, can we do option 2?
Right.
We don't know the answer to that right now.
Right.
That's all
Yeah.
it would be.
We're not
I think that's all
voting
we're talking about
we're not
right
voting
now.
to do option 2 right now. I would say the motion would be to answer these questions. So then that way we can have a fully
and
informed.
to defer starting the 218 contract award until we know the answers.
Sure.
Is that
And
correct?
that process takes about 2 years, right?
Right.
Proposition 218.
No, about 6 months, I think. How long, you had done a little more public outreach.
But we have to do that
Supervisor Brown,
eventually, but we need
you
to
were
know
about
the
9
rules.
months, I think, between,
I'm sorry.
for your 218 you just formed. You about 9 months total?
It was about that.
Yeah, I think it could be 6 months if you really rush it,
It
but
was honestly really scary the way, because it was a contracted item. And we vetted first the contractors, get them, which one to do it. They worked on it because they have to engineer the process. And then once they've done with engineering, it popped out on the system. And we weren't ready for the public to really know about it. So it was our fault, for not getting a handle on that portion of it. And so there was it was definitely a learning curve because it's been the first time really the county had done that.
I'm pretty sure we wouldn't be surprising anybody this time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so I think, Peter, that's all we're looking at right now. Nothing beyond that.
Just
Answer that
again, I was
question.
trying to get more information.
yeah.
I'm okay with
How
that.
could, if we create this new entity through LAFCO, creating a new entity through LAFCO has been done many times.
That is correct.
that's
Whether
not
a
the problem.
special district can have a separately. Yeah, I mean, the other thing that Josh said we could do, and I'll throw it out there, but somebody could just go through LAFCO and form a brand new fire protection district, unrelated to the district whatsoever, and then we could give them our assets. That can be done like that, just straight LAFCO. We're talking about something completely different. Right. They'd have to have their own elected board. I mean, Lockwood had an elected board, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Well, and we need to make sure there's a way for whatever property taxes we want allocated to fire to flow to that
I
entity.
totally understand.
Okay, right, that's,
The pop-up option would not probably work up that way, right? Like,
I don't know the answer to that. I think the answer is well, on an ongoing basis, I don't know the answer to that.
So we need to go back to Josh. and
Yeah.
ask a few more questions.
So what I would, well, let's hear public comment.
I think
Was
we
there any
should-
more board comment before we go
I
to the
think we
public?
had the board comment, so let's open up to the public, please.
Carol, you're up.
Okay, so we had a festival committee meeting this morning, and I'm speaking on behalf of that committee. We would like to know if we can direct the fundraising to this effort to pay whoever, whether it's a new entity or direct it to the 501c3 to pay for staff. We would like to do that. I guess we don't see that there's a a dire need for any particular piece of equipment, and we would like to direct the money to staffing. And we didn't know whether that was okay.
The answer is, it's not okay. You can't pay for firefighters unless you have, you know what, I take that back.
I think it's a different question that
Yeah.
Carol was asking.
Yeah.
We have money that we need to expend for legal services to investigate how to get this done. And I think the question is, I believe, Carol, correct me if I'm wrong, can the money that we need to spend to figure out what our structure is, can that be? Right.
She said staffing. I heard the word
Yeah,
staffing.
that's right.
So the
Well-
answer is we're an all volunteer fire department, and if for some reason we stay that way and the donations were limited, we could never spend it.
So can we vaguely say that we want to help with staffing, or
The stipends though, that's.
I mean, I get, you know
We
what, if you
fund the
wanted to do
501c
that,
stipends.
say it's raising money for stipends.
Cause we need the
Yeah,
money,
that would work.
to cover stipends already. We're already in the,
Yeah.
good on that. So I would,
That's-
that's what comes to mind. And thank you, Carol,
So-
first of all.
you don't think there's any way we can say we're going to help pay Rick to be a paid fire chief?
No. Because you're
So-
donating to the 501c3, you're not donating to the district. The 501c3, yeah.
So we
You-
could say stipends, or maybe we could even say attorney's fees, but not for paid salary.
Correct. Not at this time, because we don't have any paid firefighters.
Okay, well, that was a lot of our conversation this morning, and I will take it back that way.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes,
Supervisor.
Jeff.
Hey, Chief Withrow just texted me, just staffing would be roughly $1.2 million. A year,
Nuts. I think we knew that number.
but that does not include operational costs.
Yeah, or the 10% overhead.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Yeah.
double checking.
I would make a motion then that we direct staff to research the formation of a new entity in more detail to understand especially the financing options between KMPUD and a new entity. One, and two, to hold off on the 218 process, as that will be dependent on our knowledge there.
Hold off on implementing the 218. We've already issued the RFP.
Okay.
Yeah, we just wouldn't
award it.
we won't do an award until we know
Hold
more
off on
information.
awarding the RFP.
Thank you.
Which was me, yeah.
Those are the two things I would, my motion.
Okay.
Are you able to second things? The chair second?
What?
Can you second things?
I could,
Oh, okay. Just
but I
curious.
didn't.
Didn't know about process.
Oh, okay, yes, I certainly could. Is there any discussion on the proposal? Okay, I will second the motion. Any further discussion? Okay, then all in favor, say aye.
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 I abstain.
Abstain, okay.
All right.
The chair will recognize that nonverbal comment. Gotta pay attention, Howard. Lots of stuff happening. Okay, let's move on to major project updates on page 72. Okay.
Nothing really new, except for stuff we talked about in capital projects. This, based on operational discussion and the feedback from the board on capital projects today, this will be changed. So really nothing to add. I think we covered every single item in here on capital projects. So unless there's any specific questions, I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. I don't see any questions. So the general manager's report?
We got a full one, but I'll try and keep it as short as I can. So first thing, and you'll see a newsletter article come out about this, but we were very pleased that Aces Waste donated new forks for our loader. And so we can move our dumpsters around without punching them or tipping them over. They just donated them to us and they fit our loader. They asked for the dimensions. We gave them to them and they fabricated and donated the forks to us. As everyone knows, they donate the large item bin to us every year annually. They donate the e-waste bin to us. So they've been very generous with the district and I just want to acknowledge their generosity. And we will have a newsletter article reflecting the same coming out next week. Wastewater treatment plant continues on schedule. There's not a lot of activity. It's mostly been inside in the lab. But now that it's summer, we will start seeing a lot more activity in there. We will also have a newsletter article in May as they ramp up their activities. We will be revamping how the dumpsters are out there. We talked about this in operations, Peter, just because of lack of space. We need to provide them. We need to not inhibit the contractor in any way. So we will be juggling some dumpsters around. And so we'll see, especially when we get the big dumpsters in, the green waste, the large item, and the e-waste. Those take up a lot of real estate. So we'll cycle out some of our normal smaller dumpsters out of service, but we'll make sure we have tips done before and after big weekends, Labor Day, 4th of July, to accommodate that. We completed our rust forms, our rust form 7 and rust form 12, and I certified those yesterday. And I am pleased to report we are only going to need $145,000 in property taxes, unlike the $545,000 we needed last year. That is huge. That's a huge help. The board will have some decisions to make about where property taxes go because we don't need it for electric this year. So great news for us.
And that's the first year we budgeted 200,000. So it's the first year it was even resembling budget.
Yeah. So that last year we budgeted 270, it was 545.
Right.
So
Yeah.
very, very pleased with that.
Yeah.
So they're not requiring the tier ratio anymore?
No,
They are,
we met all our ratios. We met all our tier ratios. We didn't have to ask for forgiveness on anything.
And I think I misspoke at last meeting at 6.3 million kilowatt hours and 200,000 in property taxes. We meet all the ratios.
Already.
Yeah, but the fact that we were above that number meant that we could meet the ratios with less than 200,000.
So it was great.
So hypothetically, we could reallocate more property taxes.
We will allocate in October like we always do, but yes, you could reallocate to fire.
Without raising utility rates potentially.
Well, it was just
No,
allocate
they're not
coverage for
analogous.
this last fiscal
Yeah.
year.
More property taxes means more money for the funds that can receive it, and how it'll be up to the board in October to determine how that goes. Yeah. We talking with the auditors, they have a strong desire to keep the same audit team as last year just because of the hiccups, and they want the same auditor. So our audit will begin on September 16th, a little bit later than normal, but that's when we can get the same team. So that's very important for us to get. And I agreed with, talked with Olga, and we agreed that that would be a fine date to start. It also gives us more time to reconcile and do the trial balance in August, which would mean that we have all the bills that came in from June finally done, which was the problem, one of the problems last year.
And could we close the year or we do a trial close?
We do a trial balance, but the problem is they asked for a trial balance in July, so we gave them
Yeah.
a trial balance, but
But
we
we
still
didn't
had
have
bills
everything
coming
in.
in.
Yeah.
The propane master plan contract has been signed, so that is going to begin as soon as we get a little bit more snow melt. I want to be able to get in and around everything. But that has been signed. The water master plan, we did select a consultant, and the contract has gone out to them. I anticipate that will be returned to us relatively soon, and we'll begin on the water master plan. And as I mentioned in finance, our switch to 5-Star Bank has probably been short of getting out of CalPERS health insurance, is probably one of the biggest savings for the district that was unanticipated that, our staff's actions have resulted in for the district. Couple things there. We're earning one, they are matching or beating LAIF. So we are moving everything out of LAIF, which is great because I can do a 5-star transaction in 2 seconds and a LAIF transaction in 2 days, which isn't bad, but if I need to do it, I can do it. But right now they're meeting exact LAIF interest rates. We now have multiple reserve accounts, operational reserve account, and other. We have a reserve account for 501c3 that are all earning interest. As I said, we made 20,000 interest in 2 months, which is more than we made in BMO in a year. So the district's making money. You're going to start seeing a lot of weird other income, and you're going to ask the question every month, but I'll be happy to answer. I'm happy to have extra income. It's this interest. And finally, with 5-Star, we switched to 5-Star as our credit card provider from Stripe. Now, we still have Stripe as an account. We just don't use it. It's no longer linked on the website, but there's less fees for the district, and they batch everything for us. Instead of sending us 100 credit card transactions, they send us a batched credit card transaction. Staff time dealing with this has gone significantly down, and the rates are better than Stripe. which will be reflected in the rates we charge the customers that decide to use their credit cards. So kind of a win-win all around. And their customer service has been outstanding. Anything we need, we get quickly. So that's all I have.
Quick question. I remember maybe Rick, 6 months ago, you had talked about membranes in the wastewater treatment plant and potential actions involving lawyers and things like that, or at least some back and forth because of misfitting. Did I miss, is that resolved?
That is resolved.
Okay.
That is resolved. They are fabricated and they are shipping next month.
Okay.
Yep.
How was it resolved in a significant cost to us?
It was resolved in a very equitable manner and within budget.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then honestly, a shout out to Eric on that because of his previous background experience and negotiation skills. He made that happen. So it worked out really well.
Not without a few threats, but it happened.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Maybe we'll give Eric the old membranes as a thank you.
What a crappy idea. But
Okay, operations report.
A few things. Currently, staff's working on actually our summer project list. We've had several meetings and there's a lengthy Excel spreadsheet that Brandy's created to track different activities and projects. For example, we talked about manhole rehabs for the summer. And several other items to get ready for very short summer, we hope. We also had an employee appreciation lunch last week and served staff pizza and everybody got released for some skiing. And since Randy's back in the room, maybe you could talk about the Golden Shovel Award.
Absolutely. We, as management, decided that it would be a nice gesture to our staff that works outdoors in the winter to recognize that and choose one of our staff members to receive the Golden Shovel Award, which is just basically a thank you for showing up and working hard, even when it's snowing and bad weather outside. We got a few giggles, but I think mostly it was well received. And since I plan to be here long term, I purchased enough pins to get me through retirement. So we're going to keep doing this on an annual basis.
And Rick is being modest, but annually we have a snowfall contest. And we were nowhere near close. Rick was at least 100 inches off, but
Yeah.
He was the closest. With me being second place, I wanted to find a reason not to award him the gift card, but he did win fair and square with his guess of 445 inches.
Mm-hmm.
I was second at 500, so we're only at 333.
Say we're 300, so.
333.
I know we talked about snow removal quite a bit, but again, staff is winding down. We're removing about 80% of the snow sticks have been removed. We'll continue on this push. We have one more weekend. It looks like possible snow, but we are sensitive to labor and we've notified all our seasonal employees that it's getting to the point where we're going to be laying you off for the season. And so no surprises, but really pleased with the staff that we had this year, and hope to bring everybody back next year because it really helps out. For fire, there were 6 calls last month, 3 medical aids for Vail employee housing people, 2 alarm calls at Sun Meadows 1, and 1 carbon monoxide alarm call at the Sentinels. Year to date, we're up to 37 calls.
Were any of those false alarms or
No,
actually
they were
actually problems that they alerted?
There's smoke on first floor, smoke on second floor caused by cooking, people opening the doors, but there was the alarm work. It wasn't like a maintenance work or like a anomaly or mystery alarm. Systems work the way they're designed. The on-call calendar for March was great. All shifts were covered. Unfortunately for April, especially toward the end of April, due to volunteers basically leaving Kirkwood Resort, or one of my volunteers who's an EMT is going back to San Jose or Santa Cruz for the summer. We're just starting to lose our employee or volunteers. So it's the end of the month. On-call list isn't filled out as much as I'd like it to be. And they're all being very nice to communicate, hey, I'm taking May off. I'm going to Europe or Paris or France. And so May's gonna be a challenge. We're gonna have some empty shifts in May, I think. So we'll do our best to try to fill it. And we're also, May's the month that between now and the end of May, we gear up for wildlands fire season. So we're having them do S-190 to all the wildland training online that we can, as well as work with Eastern Alpine County to do some kind of joint training for wildland season. But that's my update for fire, unless there's any questions. And for solid waste, Eric mentioned about the forks, and again, I want to echo the special thanks to Joe Azaretto and Johnny Plassis, who are the key people that I speak to frequently. They're very receptive. They always pick up the phone. They're very responsive to our needs for solid waste. So we really appreciate them providing these forks and continuing with providing the great service that they do. Another thing that ACES is going to do for us is they're going to work with the Amador Fire Safe Council. And this year, our green waste bins will be, the funding for those will come from Amador Fire Council. Megan has money set aside for us. So for up to 5 bins, they'll bill ACES directly. And ACES said they're okay with doing that. They have a good relationship with the Amador Fire Council, Amador Fire Council. And so that means won't need the necessarily $5,000 ask from Eastern Alpine County for their Fire Safe Council grant funds that they might get. And so we'll basically ask for grant funds for Alpine County for chipping, which will happen in the fall. And again, thankful to Amador Fire Safe Council for the green waste bins. And that concludes my report, unless there's any questions from the board.
Okay. So standing committee reports. So finance will go first. We hadn't met. So we'll meet next week.
In personnel?
Finance.
Oh, finance.
Well, John isn't here, so I thought.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I confused me by.
Okay. Well, since you're confused, I'll ask for communications next.
There you go. I have nothing to add beyond it's in the written report.
Okay. Good. And planning? Chris?
Planning committee meeting met last month and meets this coming week. Last month was a meeting and presentation with almost all of the top, is it fair to say almost all of the top 10 propane users? And I think the committee found, my view was the committee found that the receptivity from customers to at least participate in dialogue over fuel switching was high. I and I think other committee members were pleasantly surprised at that level of receptivity and willingness to share data with the planning committee, data on usage, also data on just sort of what I'll call state of play, by which I mean what are their current boiler infrastructure, how old and aged and near to replacement might they be, what are building, concrete or structural impediments to making changes. Some of that got discussed preliminary even on the call. And this same topic of large propane fuel switch initiatives will be the main item on the agenda next week, as well as the low income issue, which I need to talk offline to understand why that's back on the agenda. So that's what planning committee is up to.
Okay, operations.
We covered everything pretty much.
Okay, and personnel will meet next week. Yes. Yeah. Okay, good.
Next week.
So temporary advisory committees, there's just the LAFCO and they're still silent. It's near a second. Haven't heard from them. Okay, general board discussion. Any particular questions any board member wants to raise? Okay, then with that, we will go into closed session regarding conference with labor negotiations. Okay, we've completed the closed session. There's no reportable actions that were taken at the session. So with that, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. And our next meeting is May 10th, which is different than what we said originally, but everybody said they were free. Then in June, we start the first Friday of the month.
Okay.
And hope to do that for many Fridays to come. Okay, thank you.
Sure that written down. I did not have that written down.